The dark side of working with the dead. Morgue workers confess. You know, if someone's been down for more than a day or two, they'll start decomposing from the inside out. If the room's quiet enough, you can hear lots of gurgling and rumbling as the gases and fluids are moving around inside. And then you move the body and they groan as the residual air in their lungs is forced out past their vocal cords. Honestly, I can see where the ideas for zombies came from. I work with a lot of hospice patients, so death is a common occurrence in my field. One night, when one of my patients had literally just passed, the phone rang. It was the daughter, hundreds of miles away, who had never checked in on the mum the whole time she was in my care. She sounded panicked and asked if her mum was okay. That timing has always weirded me out, because it really seemed like she somehow knew something happened with her mum, who near the end was confused and constantly insisted she needed to find that daughter. I work as a motor vehicle collision analyst. We get called to fatal vehicle collisions and reconstruct what happened or caused the collisions. We provide analysis and provide the courts with expert testimony as well. I've seen a lot of deceased persons and animals. I've seen almost every wretched way a human can pass away in a collision. However, there's one that stays with me every fall. In late October, I get called out to a fatal single vehicle accident. The driver was traveling through a shallow S-curve but going too fast. She wasn't able to negotiate the first turn and her vehicle enters into critical velocity. The wheels buckle on the passenger side and she rolls. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt, and through the first roll she was partially ejected out the driver's side window. Her skull was crushed between the outside of the door and the road, and continued to flop, partially ejected as the vehicle rolled. The skull was split from her left eye to the right rear behind her ear. This caused her brain matter to be strewn about the road and car. Her body was eventually thrown from the vehicle and came to a rest on the side of the road. One aspect of the job requires an inspection of the bodies to look for evidence. I approached the body that was facing upright on her back. The skull was very open and I could clearly see the inside cavity of the skull with no brain. The brain was deposited in chunks on the road and has a very distinct smell when you're experienced. That scene didn't bother me at the time. I was more fascinated than anything. A few hours later, I got a call from my wife, just asking how the day was going. I told her I was on scene and I couldn't talk too long. She then asks if I'd be working late tonight or if I'd be home on time, because tonight we were going to be carving pumpkins with the kids. Years later, I still can't carve pumpkins, and the kids have no idea why. Oh my, well, that was grim. I don't know about you folks listening, but I saw that whole accident in slow motion from the way the author described it. Don't know how I'll sleep tonight without seeing that. This is a fun job, you guys. My wife is a mortician. She's had quite a lot of wacky experiences. This one's more funny than creepy, but once she was trying to break up the rigor mortis in a decedent's hip by flexing the entire leg up. Her grip slipped and the leg swung down, the heel cracking her right in the face, resulting in a black eye. She had to explain to people that she wasn't in a bad relationship, she just got kicked in the face by a dead guy. I watched 2 corpses fry with electricity. We responded to an electrocution call. A fault had caused electricity to be traveling down the stabilizing cables of an electrical pole, and someone had touched that cable and got shocked, causing his hand to grasp tighter. His buddy must have seen it and grabbed him. By the time we got there, they were both dead, but still being electrified. We couldn't safely approach until the electricity department cut the power. So we sat there and watched these 2 bodies twitch and spark. It was like a horror movie. Oh, that's absolutely tragic. Here locally, we had a whole team of EMS get killed when someone stepped on an electrified ditch and water while they all carried the patient. If I recall, the patient was a drunk driver and had been fighting them. 4 or 5 people died, I think, including the driver. It was terrible. My fiancée died 6 days before our wedding. That morning, I tried to wake her up, and when I noticed she wasn't responding, I attempted to find a pulse and perform CPR. When I was doing CPR, she started wheezing, but it was only me pushing the air from her lungs. When I checked for a pulse, I accidentally had my thumb on her neck and felt my own pulse, and I had this glimmer of hope that I'd somehow managed to revive her, even though in hindsight it was really obvious that she had passed on already. Basically, I had my heart ripped out again in an instant when she wasn't moving or breathing. I'd only performed CPR and training courses, but never on a person, and I had absolutely no idea what to expect when pressing on someone's chest that hard. It's only been 3 months and no answers as to how she died. But now every time I wheeze, as I'm a post-COVID asthmatic, the PTSD strikes and I relive the moment of finding my love and the mother of our child dead. I had a gig doing overnight transport of dead bodies. Think black suit, white shirt, black tie, unmarked black van, and my boss made us wear white gloves too. He wanted us to look high-end. Needed to transport a recently deceased middle-aged woman, who had chest cancer, 250 miles in the dead of night from a hospital morgue to a mortuary near her extended family. It had been a solid 2 hours of total silence when the corpse lets out a low wail. Sounded like, I just about cacked myself as I swerved off the freeway and sprayed out a rooster tail of gravel and dirt. Even though intellectually I know that it's just stomach gases escaping the body, I couldn't help but be a little freaked out. I had that happen when putting one in the morgue at the hospital. It was less than 20 minutes since the doctor had pronounced them dead. I freaked out and started unzipping the bag to make sure they weren't alive. I ripped the zipper open on the bag and it was apparent the person was dead, and the eyes were open. I was not ready for that. People who'd been on blood thinner medication before they died can make a really odd scene. I saw a guy that had died looking out of his window, so he was discovered with his head on the windowsill, and there was this thick column of jellied blood from his nose to the floor. It was a bit freaky. Without the blood jelly, that's kind of a sweet, picturesque way to die. Well, unless you're the neighbor. I worked at a mortuary for a few years. We have methods to keep the jaw shut for viewing, otherwise it can gape open due to the angle of the head and neck. During a viewing, the device failed and this gentleman's mouth literally popped open. The lead embalmer was not on site, so I did my best. I ushered the family out of the room and superglued his mouth shut, but he didn't have teeth and supergluing his lips just did not work. It looked as if he were attempting to scream. I had to call in one of our other mortuaries in town, and that embalmer used a giant needle and thread to sew his mouth shut from under his chin to his palate. Here's a funny story from my grandma. She used to work in an ER in Puerto Rico. Some guy had passed away, and so the doctor came up to her and asked her to prepare the body to go to the morgue. So she got some sheets and started to wrap this guy up. As she crossed his legs, suddenly his ding-dong became fully rigid and was straight up. She wasn't sure what to make of that, but it forced her to have to redo the sheets. So, as she uncrossed the legs, the thing went down. So she was like, alright, let's get this over with. Then she crossed the legs again, and lo and behold, the flagpole went straight back up. Tried one more time, and then she got freaked out and went back to the doctor. Obviously, he found this hilarious, as the guy apparently had a prosthetic in his member. I was part of a search and rescue for 3 years. I was in the scuba team, so we were responsible for finding the usually dead people at sea. The salt water adds so much horror to a body. Not to mention the fish will usually start picking on a corpse sooner rather than later. My creepiest experience was trying to find the body of a Jane Doe who was missing. She was the victim of human trafficking. Turns out she'd taken action to end things and jumped into this rocky and sharp outcrop into the sea. We went diving in less than ideal conditions. It was low visibility and there were waves. My scuba buddy and I were looking at an outcrop when suddenly out of the darkest depths a deep blue hand emerged from this little cavern in the rocks. It began twitching and moving, and as we tried to pull the hand, the rest of the body emerged. She was being picked on by Murray eels, hence the twitching, which emerged with bits of person in their mouths. Her mouth was wide open in a scream position, and her eyes were gone. You could see tendons and bones in her hands, and the sharp rocks had torn her entire body to shreds in various spots. Her toes were mostly gone too, with some bits of bone sticking straight out. To this day, it still haunts me. The worst was pulling her out and swimming with the body as eels and fish followed us, occasionally picking on bits of flesh. I guess this is one of those videos where we bounce back and forth between dark and morbidly funny to absolute horror fuel. And this is the latter. Everything about what led up to this is just tragic. And that body sounds like the stuff of nightmares. Apologies to everyone for the tonal whiplash. Before COVID, I worked at a funeral home that wasn't particularly well run. I was a funeral assistant, and one of the embalmers was notoriously difficult to deal with. We'll call her AJ. About 4 days before this story, AJ had picked up a deceased man who had died of septicemia and who was to be cremated due to the fact that he was already in a bad state on death. So AJ had the brilliant idea to leave this gentleman on the rolling cot for 4 days unrefrigerated, figuring it wouldn't matter since he was being cremated and it was a slow week. Of course, I got the job of moving him to the crematory with AJ. We walked into the embalming room and found that the decedent had bloated and was leaking a grey liquid sludge out of his catheter onto the floor. If pestilence had a smell, it would have been what was coming from this liquid. It smelled like a warning to the base lizard part of my brain. To describe this liquid as smelling bad is an understatement. The liquid was something you could feel and sense in the air. AJ and I donned our gear, and luckily, since she placed him in a cot already, we didn't have to do much in the way of moving the body. Unluckily, the cot was relatively old, and one of the cot wheels had to be manually unlocked using hands, as the foot pedal was too rusted to effectively use. AJ told me to unlock it, so I carefully bent down and unlocked the wheel. Well, AJ got the bright idea to shake the cot violently as some sort of prank, sending grey liquid over the edge directly onto the top of my head, dripping down under my eye protection and mask. I closed my lips and eyes so the liquid running over them would stay out of my body and calmly walked to the employee bathroom in a sort of numb state of shock. The funeral home owners saw my sludgy appearance and sent me home paid for the rest of the day. Ugh. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? The creepiest thing is the frickin' curtain of flies and maggots blanketing the floor of an apartment where a woman had been decomposing in the hot, late August and early September sun for 3 weeks before she was discovered. I thought it was dark in that apartment, but there was simply that many flies caught in the glass covering the light bulbs. On the ceiling, the floor lamp, the stovetop light, just every single light was covered in flies. The windows were dark with flies, dead flies, and even more flies than that on the window panes. It was a horror movie. She was melted into the couch. When we tried to pick her up, her spine just sort of fell out of the rest of her body, and she ended up in pieces. I guess it's less creepy and more skin-crawling, but I hate flies and maggots. Freshly dead I can deal with. Decomposition in and of itself is fine. But the sight of those flies was just… ugh. I'm pretty sure I threw out the clothes that I wore that day. I just couldn't. One of the decedent's grandsons faked a breakdown over the casket, and he stole all of her jewelry. Didn't take long to figure out, and a large brawl broke out. The jewelry was retrieved, and 2 weeks later the grandson turns up, needing to be processed and buried. Creepy as heck. My grandpa had a related experience in Vietnam. He was helping wash and prepare bodies for transport home under the direction of the coroner, who had warned them about the bodies making noises when moved. After a while, Grandpa asked the coroner how the body he was washing could cry. The coroner repeated the lecture about air being pushed out, and Grandpa said that he got that part, but how did that form tears? He said things got very busy after that. Grandpa's assigned corpse wasn't actually dead, you see, just suffering a lot of blood loss, and was very, very cold. The guy got 5 liters of blood, some of it from my grandpa, and then he flew home to spend the rest of the war recovering. I worked at a funeral home for quite a while. When I first started, about a month in, I was working a holiday weekend. Only people working were the transport guys and me. They came to drop off a body and went right back to it. I thought they were still there and needed to ask a question. I walked into the embalming area and this guy was sitting up on the gurney looking right at me when I opened the door, and it literally made me pee a little in fright. Turns out the transport guys picked up the body from an area hospital. He had passed away while in a slightly reclining position and rigor had set in. They couldn't flatten him out. Still the scariest moment in my career, even if I got a laugh out of it later. Not necessarily the creepiest, but the funeral home I worked for liked to embalm as soon as possible after death. I'd embalmed a man that was dead for less than 30 minutes to an hour. He was still warm and rigor hadn't yet set in. I just kinda held his hand for a minute before I got started. Human osteologist here. I work with dry human bones, so they don't do too much. But one of the times I've ever gotten the creeps was when I was handling a crania in the collection and could hear the wisdom teeth shaking around, partially formed but not quite erupted, in the mandible. Wisdom teeth form at around 18 years old and erupt generally in the late teens or early 20s. I, at the time, was about 20 and my wisdom teeth were just coming through. I realized these remains belonged to a girl about my age, and that's probably exactly what my skull looks like. It really humanized things for me. Sometimes a fresh corpse will get shaky limbs. Makes it a real pain to bag up in a hurry. I got punched in the man purse by a dead guy. I used to work hospital security. Part of our job was to help with the 1080 assists, the movement of bodies to and from the morgue. I was on a call to move one, and the body's limbs were sticking out at odd, stiff angles. I attempted to move the corpse's arms into a better spot to shimmy the bag into the body fridge. His arm stayed in place for a moment, but when I released my grip, smack! Old buddy hit me right in the sack. I delivered pizza to a crematorium. A guy set down his pizza on the cardboard coffin to get money, and I couldn't stop looking at the box on the conveyor leading into the crematorium chamber. I pointed out, Isn't that a little disrespectful? The guy came back and simply said, "Oh, don't worry about him. He won't mind." Does that guy want to be haunted? Because that feels like how you get haunted. But I guess, to be honest, most jobs lose their sense of gravity as you become accustomed to them. And with a job where you're frequently exposed to grim sights, a sense of humor is probably something that's going to help you cope. I'd probably be the same. Attended a suspected fire once where we could smell smoke but couldn't locate the fire. Eventually, we did locate it, and when we entered the house, there was an old woman slumped over on the floor. We tried to turn her over, but we couldn't. Turned out that she'd been laid on one of the old bar-type heaters, and because the heat wasn't allowed to escape, it had burnt a hole through the floorboards, and the heater fell through the hole. However, when she was laid on it, her body fats started to melt and run into the floorboards. Then when the heater fell through, she had cooled. By the time we got there, she was one with the floor. Took 2 of us to get shovels under her to roll her over. It was years before I could eat smoky bacon flavor crisps again. I initiated compressions on my patient when she unexpectedly coded. About halfway through my first round, the patient pinked up, eyes opened, turned her head and groaned. I stopped and so did she. Turned grey and unresponsive again, so I started compressions again. She woke up again and I realized that the compressions were providing adequate perfusion to her brain so she'd wake up, but her heart wasn't doing anything. I had to continue compressions and shock my patient who was awake, groaning and alert enough to know what was happening. I've coded countless patients without a problem, but this event gave me nightmares for some time. Oh boy, my time to shine! I worked as a forensic technician and medical examiner's assistant for roughly 2 years. We were cross-trained in both autopsy and decedent removal from death scenes. I wouldn't particularly say anything was creepy per se, but some things were definitely gross and morbid. Going down to the satellite office in the south that was in the woods at 3 a.m. in the middle of a storm can be categorized as creepy for sure. You see, there was one HQ office in the state capital and a few smaller satellite offices throughout the state. However, I'll do my best to synopsize some of the creepiest things I've encountered, in no particular order. So first, the man who used women's underwear as a toilet or toilet paper. This was a strange one. 2 brothers lived in a would-be condemned house, both of which were severely intellectually challenged. One, however, more than the other. This was the most repulsive living situation I've ever personally seen. Black mold everywhere, the ceiling caving in, everything covered in crumbling drywall and water damage. Ironically enough, they had no running water. The only clean thing in the house were 2 pallets of baked beans and a Coca-Cola. The only thing these people ate were beans, and they only drank Coke. By the pallet. Anyway, we got upstairs into the deceased brother's room to find him lodged between the bed and the wall. That's not uncommon for someone who dies suddenly in their bed, in all honesty. However, what we find all over the floors is horrifying. Not only does the bedroom look like a typical hoarder's place, with newspapers and rank junk piled up beyond your knees, no, what we see is women's underwear spewed across the floor, each covered in brown matter. Not only this, there were firearms everywhere. Not like nice, well-kept weapons either. We're talking like old, decrepit, rusted-out things. The entire house was filled with them. Hundreds of unusable pieces. The ATF had to come clear the scene and document all of them. It was insanity. The autopsy, however, was completely unremarkable. Then there was the man whose face was infested with wasps. This one was fairly unremarkable overall, with the exception of the fact that his face had been eaten off by a wild animal overnight. This poor soul was riding his bike through a field of cranberry bogs and had suddenly died. By the morning, his face was eaten off by a wild animal, and he looked like the Terminator. Some musculature remained, as did one of his eyes, but his lips, cheeks, and soft bits were eaten. Upon my arrival, a small swarm of yellow jackets had taken kindly to the man's face and were eating and laying eggs in it. We had to bug bomb the body bag before opening it to make sure the wasps didn't get into the morgue. Decapitation via high-wire tension. This one was a man who jumped from a bridge after tethering a length of high-tension wire to it and his neck as a noose. The force just ripped his head clean off. That was the first and only decapitation I actually saw on the job. Man self-deletes via taking too much of an experimental med in dental school. This was one of the most exciting scenes I ever went to. A, because it was being classified as a top-tier hazmat situation, and B, the emergency response presence at the dental school. In the middle of the major city for the state in which I worked, a dental student had decided he no longer wanted to be alive anymore and took way too much of an experimental medication. When my partner and I arrived on the scene, it was chaos. Police, EMS, fire, hazmat, the news, just everyone was there. We had to suit up in hazmat to go inside the school and reclaim the body, then get brushed down by the fire hazmat team and then clean the body in an airlocked pop-up tent as well. The creepy part being that nobody actually knew what med or cocktail of meds the guy had used, nor what other effects it might have had. So basically we had to treat it as if it was an anthrax infection or something. It was crazy. And then finally there are the two stories, of which I'll just let the titles speak for themselves. Man castrates himself and swallows it, and man dies via exsanguination due to sticking various objects up his butt, including but not limited to a guitar. People who quit their jobs on the first day, what was your "I'm out of here" moment? I used to work at a craft store as a cashier, but quit when I moved. Ended up going back a couple of years later to make some extra cash, but this time in the framing department. During the interview, they swore up and down I would only ever be a backup cashier because I refused to have a full cashier shift. First shift after the interview was listed as framing, but I'm put on cash and told that actually most of my shifts would be cash since they'd found someone else for framing. I spent the next 6 hours giving everyone who came to my register 20% off everything and then never went back. Not technically first day, but second day. When I was 20 or so, I got hired to be a temporary floor member for Forever 21 during the holiday season. My training started a week before Black Friday, so the store was already kind of in chaos. On my first day of training, I walked in and the floor manager gave all the new hires a tour, showing us the facility and layout of the store. After this, I was assigned to a veteran floor member to shadow and get an idea of what my job was and what my duties would be. As soon as I was assigned, the manager dipped, never to be seen again. An hour and a half into my shift, my shadowee got an emergency family call and had to take off for a week. When this happened, I found some other floor manager and explained the situation and asked them who else I would shadow. The manager's response was, "Just do what you can by yourself, you'll be fine, everyone else is busy." Figured we'll be okay, so I'll try. I don't know if any of you have shopped in the women's section of Forever 21, but during seasonal sales they'll have multiple articles of clothing that all look exactly the same, with slight differences. Example, a white cardigan with 4 buttons that looked literally the same as a white cardigan with 5 buttons. The best part was these different items were often placed in completely separate parts of the store, and it was the job of the dressing room to return the unpurchased items to the correct section so the employees could put them back on the shelves. Well, these employees fricking sucked, and I didn't know if they were part of my section or not, so I'd spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to find where they'd go before realizing, wait, this isn't even my section. I've checked literally every rack. So I'd put it back on the sorting rack and moved to the next item. More than 50% of the stuff I was told to reshelf wasn't my section. I just did as best as I could and got ready for my next miserable day. The next day I come in and the store manager pulls me to her office and told me how slow I was the day before, and if I want to keep working there, I need to be very fast. I explained my lack of training and unfamiliarity with the store, and she told me if I didn't know where the clothes were in sections, I should come in on my free time and memorize where stuff was at. I spent the rest of my shift putting clothes in random freaking places, then never came in for a third shift. Frick that place and frick their management. Nothing as satisfying as hearing a person do what we've all wanted to do at times, flipping off the manager for their unreasonable bullcrap and leaving. My first internship was at a Brazilian teen detention center. It's akin to a prison, but Brazilian law has some distinctions between crimes committed while as an adult or a teenager. Teens go through socio-educational measures. I was walking through a courtyard with my supervisor when some doctors came running, flailing their arms and screaming while officers came running from the opposite direction. I get pulled by my supervisor who just tells me to run back to our office. These teens, as young as 12, had escaped their block. A few minutes later, an officer comes knocking on doors and the officers and yelling for everyone to run outside because a fire had broken out. Some of the teens had set mattresses on fire in their cells. I didn't really nope out, my teacher did. She hadn't even been there that day, so I was forced by the university to choose another place to intern at. Oh well. I was 17 and working precast concrete. Refused to use a rusted-to-crap ladder. Supervisor called me a wuss, got up 7 rungs before his foot went through a rung, heard his foot snap as he fell. I called an ambulance and walked to my car in the parking lot. Wasn't exactly the first day, but I didn't show up after the second shift. It was rather a popular cafe chain in my country. I was hired to work in the kitchen as a cook along with another senior cook. Let's put aside the fact that I had zero cooking knowledge whatsoever. The senior cook was leaving the kitchen every 5 minutes to smoke. I was just there alone, in the kitchen. Orders are printing fast and I'm standing there not sure what to do first. And the waitress comes over yelling at me to cook stuff I don't have any business cooking, definitely not on my own. Later on, the senior cook told me they had at least 2 rats running around the kitchen, showed me they pooped on a plate. I never came back, and I'm glad the place got shut down. On the first day of working at Amazon warehouses, the managers broke down to everyone how a 15-minute break works there. Walking to the bathroom is 2.5 minutes, 10 minutes of actual break, and then 2.5 minutes to go back to your stations. It took me 2.5 minutes to walk to my car, and I took a forever break. Summer job working for a landscape architect. Got to the job site and he asked me to dig a hole in some rocky dirt. I asked for a shovel. He didn't have one. I asked for a hand spade. He didn't have one either. He told me to just dig a hole with my bare hands and then drove off to another site, leaving me completely alone. I dug for a little bit and then said, "Frick this," and left. Had the job specified that I needed to supply my own tools, I could have, but it didn't, and I wasn't going to work for someone that expected folk to dig through hard, rocky soil with their hands. Sounds like he sucks at communicating. Those bosses are the worst. I'd say he's got bigger fish to fry than communication. Guy runs a hole-digging business with no shovels. I noped out of an interview one time, thanked them at the end and said it wasn't for me. Those interviewing, management-level folks, started arguing with each other in front of me during the interview. I figured if this is the vibe at the management level, then I sure as heck don't want to be your employee. Answered an ad in the paper, this was in the mid-90s, for what seemed to be an office job making sales calls when I was in college. Did a phone interview and was called back for an in-person interview. When I go to the interview, I'm led into a room with about 50 other people and a small stage at the front of the room. We're all somewhat confused as to what's going on. Finally, a guy gets on the stage and informs us that we've been selected for the opportunity to sell Cutco. Me and 2/3 of the rest stood up and walked out. Anytime I see more than a dozen people for a job interview, I just nope the frick right out. If it's not door-to-door sales paid only on commission, it's some multi-level marketing crap. I wish some job interviews would be more forthcoming about that. Some places have outright lied to me. Legitimate response. I think that last person's rule about the number of applicants is a fairly good one to go by. I just wish I'd walked away from my first bullcrap door-to-door job. I was a cashier at Lowe's during college for less than a full day. I made it through the multiple-day training, but there was so much stupid crap going on, I almost thought I was on a hidden camera show. All the employees complained about how hard they had to work while simultaneously not getting enough hours. Nobody understood why they were hiring like 4 new people. I was one of those 4. Turns out it's because they were progressing through an indecent conduct complaint that required restructuring of the store and firing some of the employees. This was known to HR and explained to new hires, against company policy, but it wasn't known to the employees. Apparently, some of whom still worked there, including the fricking person doing the training. She was really inappropriate and said not to worry about the indecent conduct stuff and that everything would go back to normal soon enough and that we wouldn't have to be so uptight. They fired her the day before I started, along with one of the cashiers who trained me. She also offered me terrible guidance for the application process. They were looking for a part-time help, and 2 of the 3 days they needed help on, I had off from school. I told them I couldn't work nights most nights, but if they needed daytime help, it had to be on one of those days. She said if I was too restrictive, they wouldn't keep me on, and lied to my boss about my availability to make me even more attractive than I already was. Wink! And told me to schmooze them a bit and I'd make it further. She said in the end it wouldn't impact anything and I'd get those days. My first week's schedule, I was working mornings every day that I was in school and I wasn't given any hours on my days off. Aside from the fact that I was given 2 times the hours the position called for, when other employees were shorted, my work schedule was literally impossible to consolidate with my school schedule. I only went to work on my first day to tell them that I was quitting and that their application process was a fricking mess. They couldn't figure out how so much went wrong, and then they asked who trained me and everything made sense. They thanked me for at least showing up to quit, unlike the other 3 they hired, who had just stopped returning their calls and no-showed on their first days. A long time ago, not long after getting my papers as a chef, I had an interview at a hotel for a position in the kitchen. The executive chef and I chatted in his office for about 20 minutes. At the time, I remember him coming off as very arrogant, which is quite common in this field. I didn't think much of it at the time, as the pay was decent and the shift was what I wanted. As I was leaving his office, I turned to leave through the dining room, the way I'd come, which was closed at the time. It was another hour or so before service started, and he says to me, "No, not that way. Go through the kitchen. You're not good enough to go through the dining room." I was so surprised by what he said. I just did what he asked without a word. Later on, after I'd got home, I phoned him up and said that after having a close look, I decided that his menu wasn't good enough and that I wouldn't be accepting his offer. Restaurant. Swept under my station when we were closing. Giant brown pile came out with the broom from under the lowboy fridge. The pile then began to scatter. It was hundreds of roaches. Never returned. My first ever job. I was 13 and would be delivering phone books from the back of a van through people's letterboxes. So I'd be in the back of the van with the phone books and there was an older guy slowly driving while I went back and forth to the van/houses with the books. At one point the van was getting empty, so there was more space to move around, and we'd finished the delivery in the streets that we were paid to deliver in, and he drove to another. While driving there, he drove, let's say aggressively, and I fell inside the back where the books were. I wasn't sitting in a seat as the van had no seats in the back. As I put my hand out to steady myself, I accidentally laid it across a portable radio that had its antenna extended, but the antenna was also broken halfway and razor sharp. I sliced the palm of my hand clean open 3 to 4 inches. I can only describe what I saw as gruesome. I said to pull the van over and I needed help. He saw my hand and just threw me a plastic bag, the kind you'd get at a supermarket, and told me to wrap my hand in it. Then continued with the deliveries. At least he delivered the remaining books by himself. I should have been taken to a hospital or at least home to my parents, and I quit after that and never showed up again. As you can imagine, my parents were quite angry at him. Well, as awful as my first after-school delivery job was, it wasn't that bad, and you have my sympathy. At least when I got injured, they would just schedule a later delivery for me. I got hired at a very small knockoff dollar store in an old, failing mall. The owner was foreign with a very thick accent. He told me I'd get $6 an hour, but neglected to mention it was under the table. I spent about an hour stocking the very overly cluttered shelves before I was told to get more chips out of the back storage area. I walked back there and there's about a dozen men sitting on boxes all crammed into a small back room. I asked where the chips were and these guys all glared at me. They started speaking in another language and rapidly motioned towards me. Then one guy got up and asked what I needed. I told him I was supposed to get a box of chips and he got a box out of the pile and handed it to me. The entire time these guys are all staring at me. Everything back there looked shady as all hell and it was very uncomfortable. A while later I had to use the restroom, which was also in the back. These guys all just wordlessly glared at me while I went into the woman's restroom. While I was in the restroom, someone tried to open the door. I was the only woman there. The owner told me he wanted me to come back that night late in the evening well after the mall closed. I didn't show up. I came in the next morning and lied about why I couldn't work there. He still gave me the few bucks from what little time I did work. I don't know what in the heck that guy had going on there, and I didn't want to find out. Restaurant line chef. Worked a 12-hour shift and was given 2 breaks of about 10 to 15 minutes each. Burned my hand numerous times because they gave me plates that came right from the oven, and never said a word. End of the shift, I told the head chef I was done. He called me soft and said I was the 3rd person to quit on him after a day. I said, maybe it's the way you treat people. Funny how people think it's not their problem when many people quit working with them. Restaurant owners never seem to get this. I was a hostess at a restaurant like this for about a year. We could never hold on to the kitchen staff because they were worked to the bone and barely paid. It affected the whole restaurant. Dishwashers were either swamped or had nothing to do because the tickets were too backed up. Busboys were the same. The servers got crap tips because the food was so slow and the managers were constantly comping food and getting chewed out about long waiting times. And even the hosts had long waits and sections full of empty tables we couldn't sit because we were trying to let the kitchen catch up. Then the idiot owner would come in, sit everyone on my list, and go yell at the kitchen for being slow. We were lucky if new guys lasted a week back then. Restaurant work is a joke. I've been in New York City restaurants on and off for about 10 years. They all turn to crap or just start as bullcrap right from the get-go. My last job was as a sous chef. I'll never work the line again. 2 times. Once I applied for and got a telemarketing job. I didn't know what it entailed. After an hour, I knew it was a terrible fit. Auto-dialing people during their dinners, trying to sell them stuff they didn't want, and reading a horrible script while sitting in a soulless grey cubicle. I got up, went to the manager, apologized, and said it wasn't a good fit for me. He seemed understanding. Another time, I attended a Make Easy Money at This Job seminar, and turns out it was selling knives door to door. I don't know if I technically quit or just noped out at the end of it. I answered an ad for a babysitting job. I was already working on a casual basis, but it was sporadic, so I thought some after-hours babysitting would be welcome extra cash. The couple were both in the military and proceeded to tell me that I would be staying in the spare room and looking after their 6-month-old child around the clock, as well as doing the housework. I would have 1 day off every 2 weeks. They said it's cash in hand, so I could sign on to the dole, unemployment benefit, to make up the rest of the money. I left on the spot. They wanted a live-in housemaid and a nanny, not a babysitter, and they were not able to pay for one. Why they thought it was basically up to me to illegally collect the dole and subsidize them, I don't know. Applied for a job at my longtime favorite restaurant, celebrated my birthday there every year. Owner asks me to come in for basically a tryout, as I communicated I was looking at other job possibilities as well. I come in and they just stick me on dishwasher for an hour. No biggie. Then the dishwasher doesn't show up, so the kitchen manager asks me to stay on their lunch rush. Says I'll get paid for the hours. I do. Kitchen staff was nice, so I was happy to help out, even though I figured I'd be taking a different job. I fill out a time card at the end of the shift and tell the manager I probably wouldn't be back. He understands and thanks me for the help. Fast forward a couple of weeks and he tells me to email the owner after I ask him if I should pick up my measly paycheck. I do, and she basically tells me to frick off over text. Tells me it was staging and that she had told me I wouldn't be paid. I respond that I understand, but that I stayed for an extra 3 hours which I was told I'd be paid for. She stops responding, and I decide I want to be petty over the $40, so I get the state labor department involved. Dude goes in there and makes her pay me for the hours, including the first staging hour. Couple weeks later, I got my $40, never went back to that restaurant. In hindsight, I'm very glad I did this, and sharing the story with others in my city, I learned this practice was very common with local restaurants. Hopefully, others learn to stand up for their labor too from my small experience. Secondly, this restaurant closed down a couple of weeks after I got that paycheck. The owner made a long-winded complaint on the Facebook page about how the food culture had changed in the city and her restaurant didn't fit in anymore. Total bullcrap, they were always popular. Most people theorized the terrible mismanagement and employee abuse caught up to her. It's interesting. This story is from about 5 years ago, and I stopped my long restaurant career about 7 years ago. I wonder if there's been any significant transformation in restaurant culture, or if it's still the same exploitative crap, different date. Maybe you modern waiters and chefs can let me know in the comments. More hospo stories to follow. I was a waitress, the only waitress at a just-opened diner. The boss didn't have me sign any paperwork, everything was under the table. But that wasn't what made me quit at the end of the night. In order to get me where he wanted me to go, he would pinch my skirt at the upper thigh, not quite the butt, but very close, and pull me around like it was a leash. Needed me in the kitchen? Rather than call me, he would come out, pinch my skirt, and pull me to the kitchen. Needed me at the cash machine? Again, come over to wherever I was. Didn't matter if I was serving a customer, and he would grab my skirt to pull me. That act, in itself, made some customers uncomfortable. Mind you, one couple left almost 50% tip at the end, but I think it was more out of pity and embarrassment on my behalf. I was supposed to come in the next day, but I called that night and said the job wasn't for me. I came in a couple of days later to turn in my apron, and he just took a wad of cash out of his pocket and paid me then and there. God, he was creepy. I think it was a smart move to quit. When the microwave in the lunchroom was coin activated. This is like when I made my patrons pay money to use the bathrooms at my roller coaster park when the ticket prices weren't cutting it. Amazing move. Had an orientation for an alarm company. Next day, the manager calls and says don't worry about going into the office and to meet at Planet Hollywood. They like to get to know the employees better over lunch. Next day, I go into the office and another employee who I had not met says, "You must be Steve." I was like, huh? They responded, "Light-skinned, pretty boy," is how the manager described me. In the same conversation, I found out no one else had ever been invited for a get-to-know-you lunch. And I was out. Got what was supposed to be a prestigious political internship that came with a security clearance and everything. Found out at orientation that the part-time internship was really 40 to 60 hours unpaid, and that no intern had gone on to work with the organization and weren't really given a leg up for other federal posts. We were supposed to facilitate meetings with heads of state, coordinate conferences, and assist the actual employees with composing published research papers for which we would not be credited. They were definitely drinking their own Kool-Aid, so I bounced right on out of there. I was hired to be a waitress, which has a lower hourly wage due to tips. The entire shift they had me wash dishes in the sink, but paid me waitress wages. A few months later, the restaurant was investigated for another of fraudulent activities. I interviewed for a professional marketing assistant and got the job straight away. I was under the impression that I would be an assistant to the man I was interviewed by. When I showed up for my first day, the same waiting room I was in the previous day was full of people. I quickly learned that we were all hired and I would be a door-to-door salesperson selling some pretty useless crap. I spent my entire day inside a Starbucks applying for other jobs and went home, got paid, but never came back. I wasn't the person, but I was training a new guy at a movie theater. A customer asked for extra butter. She was nice and normal. Not a mean or rude customer, the kind I would pay to handle all day long. He puts the popcorn tub down, says, "I'm going to the bathroom," takes off his apron and walks out the front door and never came back. Maybe he crapped his pants and couldn't bear the thought of returning. My brother got fired because he crapped his pants on the third day on the floor and had to go home early. They said they fired him because he wasn't upselling enough at the register. But if you get fired on your second day on register for not trying to get people to sign up for credit cards and the day before you crap your pants, you got fired for crapping your pants. If you make 10,000 shoes, you're a shoemaker. If you fly 10,000 hours, you're a pilot. If you crap one pair of pants, you're the pant crapper. How have you observed or used body language to your own advantage? The most amazing occurrence of body language I've witnessed was a friend back in high school that could control our group of friends. Whenever we were standing in a circle and he wanted to speak, he would simply take a step or two towards the middle. This would cause everyone to quiet down, effectively giving him room to speak uninterrupted. We didn't catch on for a while, but the way he was able to perform it so subtly was amazing. I believe this has to do with personal space and how we instinctively react to an incoming presence. Similar simple ways to control a group. If you're eating dinner and everyone is done and just chatting, simply stand up. People usually follow suit almost unconsciously. Alternately, if you're a group or milling around but should be heading somewhere, just start walking. Generally, everyone will follow. Sometimes I have to tag a friend or two to start walking with me if part of the group is not paying attention, but once you get 3 or 4, the rest tend to follow. Anyone not following due to being engrossed in conversation will soon go, "Wait, where did everyone else go?" and chase after you. I do this a lot at crowded sci-fi and gaming conventions when my group needs to be at a panel or meet up. Next up, we have a rather long story about an individual who seems to have mastered this particular subject matter and used it fully to his own advantage. I once sat next to a guy in my college class that was unreal with things like this. For instance, once before class, while we were waiting outside the room for the professor to arrive, he saw a pretty girl coming down the hall. Immediately, he goes, "I'm gonna go talk to her," but doesn't move. I'd always known the guy was suave beyond my years, so I'm really curious as to what his icebreaker is going to be and waiting to see this in action. Being a bit unsure of myself in my early college years, this was like Houdini personally giving me a behind-the-scenes look at a magic trick. The girl was very pretty but had sort of a sour look on her face. In my head, I'm like, no pickup line in the world is cracking this iceberg. Then I watched the true master in action. My first mistake was ever assuming he needed an icebreaker in the first place. He didn't simply start a conversation by saying something, or anything. He used his body posture to make her start the conversation with him. As nonchalantly as you could get, he pulls out his cell phone and pretends to look down at it. When she's about 3 feet away from us while still glancing down, he takes a half step in her direction, in her path. In one smooth motion, he looks up, fakes a reaction of, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention," as he takes a half step back to make room for her and leans back against the wall. Her, apparently totally sold on his genuine surprised look and repositioning to make room for her. "Oh, thank you." Him, "Hey, no worries. Traffic these days." "Huh. Yeah, is that Professor X's cost accounting class?" Yeah, how did you know that? Are you an accounting major?" "Yeah, I'm in IA2 right now." How majors refer to intermediate accounting 2, meaning she was about 1 semester behind us in the course cycle. "Well, you'll do fine if you can handle IA2. It's more difficult than cost accounting is. The trick is to..." "Oh, really?" And the conversational small banter continues. He also told me later he already knew she was an accounting major by recognizing the book she was carrying when he first glanced up from his phone. Don't ask a question you don't already know the answer to in the first conversation, but people like to think they're being informative. This guy was full of these little insights, and how good he was on this bordered on socially manipulative. So yeah, body language is unbelievably powerful for how subtle it is. To answer some of the inquiries I'm getting about this story, I would say he was average looking on the whole, but he certainly knew how to carry himself, and he did dress nice as well. Sitting next to him can also confirm his cologne was on point. So I don't think he had any unnaturally good looks, but good posture, good dress, and a general clean, hygienic appearance will help maximize anybody's potential. And of course, he had that unmistakable aura of natural confidence. You could tell him his car just blew up, and the first thing he'd do was lean to the girl next to him and go, "Hey, I need to go car shopping. Want to come with me? No, he wasn't even close to being creepy. That's what was so unreal about it. For the first few weeks, that was my thought as well. Nobody's this good without being a serious creep. Or, he does this just to bang chicks. Once again, my mistake. It was never about doing the deed with women. In fact, he never made any kind of comment like that whatsoever. No innuendos, no, bro, this chick is so hot. Nothing. He genuinely wanted to meet and get to know this girl to see if they had any chemistry. That simple. And no, he wasn't really a pickup artist. No, he didn't have any hack to the system. There was no good lines. The guy wasn't trying to teach me anything. Although he ended up teaching me quite a bit. This guy just was. I don't think he could teach it even if he really wanted to. What I learned was merely through observation. The beauty of it was how subtle it was, and I wonder if he even knew all of it consciously, or if it was just ingrained subconsciously. For example, when she first said, "Oh, thank you," we were both leaning against the hall wall and she was passing in front of us. Simple enough. By the time the conversation progressed, we were in more of a triangle-type shape, more inclusive, but I never even saw the fricker move. Don't recall anything of us shifting positions whatsoever, but there we were. And only after going over it in my head 1,000 times did I even recognize that it happened, let alone know how it might have made her feel more welcomed. So subtle. But there in the moment, I find it hard to believe that it was part of a calculated endeavor on his part. And I know it wasn't on mine. Like I said, he just was. If I learned one thing from this guy, it would be this. There's a saying in the running world that if you want to be fast, don't try and run fast, try and run easy. And then, when you can run easy, try and run light on your feet. Don't worry, if you can run easy and light on your feet, you will be fast. Same concept applies. If you want to be good at meeting women, don't try and be good at meeting women, put some effort into yourself. Dress well, shower, exercise, these things matter. Learn to get to know all kinds of people of both genders because you want to get to know them. And do it till it's easy for you. Don't worry, if you can put some effort into yourself and getting to know people is easy, you will meet women. And there we have it, folks, the man who just apparently lives and breathes this stuff. I'm still not entirely sure he was all that, and maybe the writer of the story is just a little bit infatuated with him themselves, but there we go. To me, the absolutely most important thing I've learned about body language is that it had to be taken into context. What else they're doing, what they're talking about, who they're talking to, where they are, etc. When starting to observe, it's easy to take one gesture or posture or expression and go, "Hey, look, crossed arms. That equals defensiveness." Or whatever, but that's only one part of an equation. If body language is an actual language, then crossed arms is just one word. You can't figure out what someone is saying by just looking at one word. You've got to look at the whole sentence. I often catch myself mirroring the actions of people I'm interested in, so I guess that's something. Agreed, it's a circular paradox. I can never work out if I'm mirroring them or they're mirroring me. Either way, it definitely indicates interest. During a job interview, sit in the same posture as your interviewer is sitting in. It gives the impression that you're feeling the same way that they are. "I don't think you're right for this job." "My thoughts exactly, sir." Both get up and leave. In a quiet room full of people, for example, a classroom, scream as loud as you can in your mind. Anyone that winces is a mind reader. You should watch out for them. "Wow, I'm surprised I'd come this far in the thread to get to the important stuff. I just did it, and someone wouldn't stop staring at me for 5 minutes. Confirmed." Not exactly body language in the traditional sense, but I've sold 6 or 7 houses in my time, and I've always known which viewer would put on an offer by the fact that they 1. Used the bathroom, and 2. Altered something. It's held true every time. I stage my houses very carefully, and I know when anything has been moved, or used, or changed, and would tell my husband to expect a call from the agent that evening. My guess is that the folks are subconsciously taking possession or marking territory. Ah yes, christening the toilet is vital when moving into a new home. Failing that, peeing your initials into the master bedroom carpet is an acceptable substitute. When it comes to non-verbal communication, you don't just like for one particular behavior, you're looking for clusters, and even then, nothing is ever 100% true. Also, you have to take into consideration different cultures have different mores. What's considered acceptable in one culture might not be in another. In a group conversation, people will tend to look at the person they're most comfortable with the most. Self-touching is often a sign a person is nervous or anxious. Lip-biting is often a sign of arousal. Pupil dilation is a sign that a person is excited, and possibly on substances. I think the changes in body language are more significant than anything else. For example, and I've had this pointed out to me, I normally stand with a pretty straight posture, ex-figure skater here. But when I start talking to someone else I think is cute, I quite obviously arch my back and shift my weight entirely onto one hip. This might be a normal posture for someone else, but the shift is what makes it significant. In conclusion, don't trust static body posture. Someone could have just been chilling like that. Watch how their body position changes when you approach. That's possibly a valid hypothesis. I think I definitely shift and shuffle a bit more when I'm anxious or uncomfortable about something or someone, so maybe this post author knows what they're talking about. Speaking from someone who used to be in car sales, some guys look for the wiggle during test drives. That's shifting in the seat while driving to get more comfortable. Probably something to do with taking mental ownership of the vehicle. Hands in pockets or arms crossed equals defensive. Needs more rapport building before pitching. Some people are so intimidated about walking into a dealership that they prefer to walk the lot after business hours at night. That's fine too. We had a computer programmer so overly stimulated that we recognized that and organized a quiet room for him to sit down and discuss his options. He bought the car and thanked us. Some things like handshakes are culturally specific. I always greeted someone with a firm handshake and look in the eye. Clients from India generally give limp shakes because that's more usual if they shake at all. Chinese and Japanese prefer no bodily contact in business. A quick bow or nod usually suffices. For farmers, whoever speaks first loses. There was a guy who regularly came in to look around and all these sales guys tried to pitch him. He eventually brought from the one guy who kept his mouth shut and ignored him. Not sure how that works. Always know who the boss is. Do not assume it's the man or the woman based on who's talking the most, based on hetero norms. Both parties need to be engaged. Very low chance of a deal without the spouse, regardless of what someone says about being able to make a decision. Work and loss prevention. This one, among many, many others, is almost always true. When a person has made the decision to shoplift and is about to conceal, they look like they're peeing in the pool. Every time. LP is all about body language. Or they're like me and they're paranoid that they changed their mind about that thing they were going to buy and put it back, but then picked it up again and now everyone thinks I'm shoplifting, but I swear I'm not. And no, I do not need assistance and I'm a normal average customer, just going about my casual business in your fine establishment. I don't want to go to prison. I won't make it in prison. Shaking someone's hand can make you memorable. This is just something I've observed, so I'm not passing it off as a general truth. When I meet someone new in a casual setting, a friend of a friend, someone's co-worker, someone's family member, etc., a person who acknowledges your existence and makes their way over to shake your hand will have an immediate impact on me over someone who just smiles and nods or waves or whatever. I feel more comfortable with someone who makes the initiative to shake your hand for whatever the reasons may be. I'm much more likely to approach someone whose hand I've shaken to learn more about them at some point in the night. This very much goes in the business world as well. I know it's common knowledge to shake someone's hand when you meet them first time in a business setting, but if someone approaches you to shake your hand while they're leaving, they are far more memorable in my mind. It gives me a sense of belonging, knowing that someone thought about me in particular before leaving a place or setting and had to make their way over to let me know they're leaving. This also works with customer-client relationships. If a customer shakes my hand after a transaction is completed, I'll remember them and may give them some sort of incentives or discounts next time I see them. Americans love a firm handshake, but the same custom is not necessarily true in other countries. It can also be a male thing, with some men using a crushing handshake and holding it for a long time, making it a move of dominance. Lyndon Johnson used to hold the handshake and then grab the lapel of the other man's suit with his other hand, and then stand very close until he got the answer he wanted. Pediatrician here. Girls as young as 9 to 12 will start twirling or playing with their hair if they are attracted to someone. It's pretty adorable to see it develop. This doesn't have to be a romantic attraction, you weirdos. It can happen when they see someone doing something impressive, talking to someone important, etc. This behavior continues but can take on many different patterns, like pushing their hair forward. Some guys take this as a sign that the girl is covering up, but it's probably closer to, "Hey, look at my pretty hair." Take a look at the audience during The Voice or whatever country has got talent, etc. Look at the audience when a slightly cute boy sings decent or better. It's hilarious to watch. It's like a collective sploosh among the girls ranging from 12 to 32. Well, now I can't unread this ever, and now if I ever watch a show with a studio audience, the people I'm watching with are going to wonder why I burst out laughing when a good-looking man walks on stage and there is a camera shot to the audience. When one person grooms another during social interaction, "Oh, you've got some lint on your shoulder, let me just..." She or he is being subconsciously affectionate to that other person and welcoming him or her into the pack. I mean family. Like monkeys picking each other's nits. I had a teacher that was a former cop. He pointed out that a person in a normal state of mind will swing their arms slightly while they move or walk. Angry people have a tendency to hold their arms at their sides and not move them. Always true? Maybe not. Often true? Sure. The same basic rule applies here, and also implies that you're trying to hide something. If your hands sit unmoving in your pocket, you're most likely angry but attempting to keep this hidden. Brooding, if you will. If they're swinging around in there, you're in a normal state of mind or attempting to hide the fact that you're publicly pleasuring yourself. But what if you just want to put your hands in there because you don't like flailing them around? Clearly, any attempt at comfort and ease is a sign of being angry. There's too many absolutes in this thread. I had purposely unbuttoned and tucked the flaps of my 2 breast pockets into the pockets before going out a few weeks back because I wanted to try the look. Anyway, while talking to a female friend, she reached over and fixed them. I thought it was rather endearing. I often fixed my boyfriend's sleeves when we were first going out. I still do, but I did it back then too, and I kept apologizing, just like, "Sorry, that was bugging me. It was all flipped up." And finally, after a handful of months, he said, "No, he really likes it when I do that." I never understood why, but I guess it's probably for this reason. It's a welcoming feeling, I guess, someone fixing you up to make sure you look nice. People who mimic your body language don't want to displease you. That's as close to universally true as these things go. You cross your arms, they cross their arms, that sort of thing. Nervous people often lick their lips and swallow. Liars often do too, as well as touch their mouth, but it can be delayed after the lie when they feel like they've got away with it. Like if you respond with, "Oh, that makes sense," that's when they lick their lips. People falsely accused of lying generally have a stronger reaction than those caught in the lie. One-on-one, that sometimes comes out as the honest person confronts you face-on, while the liar turns a little away. It's more about the line of their hips and shoulders, not so much where they point their nose. I once read that if someone is accused of something they didn't do, they'll be more likely to use contractions in their speech. Something to do with being so comfortable with their own innocence that they speak informally. "I didn't twist her arm." Truth. "I did not twist her arm." Lie. Maybe bunk, but when applied to my children, I find it's fairly accurate. "I did not have relations with that woman." If you're in a situation where you have to pretend to be surprised, keep your eyebrows raised for more than a second. That's a telltale sign. Genuinely surprised people will keep their face in that state for more than 1 second. I'm pretty sure you just made 10,000 people raise their eyebrows and pretend to be shocked at something, only to find that they looked ridiculous. I discovered this one on my own, although I probably wasn't the first. This works for girls and guys. When someone suddenly sees someone they find attractive, the first thing they usually do is fix their hair. They usually can't stop themselves, it's an instinctive thing, like, "Oh, someone's hot, gotta look fly." So the next time you're walking about and someone fixes their hair right when they see you, they're attracted to you. Can confirm. I always do this when looking at the mirror. Wandering eyes in a shop. Not the determined kind, the thinking kind. They're looking for presents. This observation has become so spot on that I ask our customers, "So, who are you getting a gift for?" And that always surprises them and breaks the ice. People looking to steal something have their eyes everywhere else besides what they're taking. Watching their body versus their eyes is a pretty good sign to customer service them into leaving. I remember saying to some kid that just pocketed some rare earth magnets at my store, "Hey man, those magnets are pretty cool, huh?" He then rounded the corner and stuck them into a metal pole and walked out. I felt more proud of myself for stopping the theft more than the $2 it saved the store. Working in a bookshop, this was usually so obvious you could laugh. You'd get guys walk in, open a random fiction novel in the middle of the book, and start skimming through it like a magazine. But their eyes were never on the pages, they'd never even look at what they were reading. This is a cool switch. According to AmITheA, changing your posture can change your mindset, and your mindset can change your behavior. So, say, sit in a submissive way for just a couple of minutes, and inexplicably, you're not as likely to make assertive positions. Now, changing to a powerful stance, and a couple of minutes later with no prompting, you feel like you're in charge. Assertive and comfortable with making high-power decisions, even when they're a gamble. Glance at their feet. If they're pointed towards you, they're engaged in your conversation. If they're pointed away, often toward an exit, they'd like to end the conversation. I use this at work all the time, and I notice myself doing it. If the person isn't breathing, you should run away because you've killed them in your fit of rage. Works every time. If you see a guy walking down the street and he awkwardly lifts one leg up higher than the other repeatedly, he's trying to peel his sack off his inner thigh without alerting whomever he is with. We mostly do this when we're with women or family. If we're around other guys, no fricks given. I wish my roommate would learn that me walking away from him into my room means it's the end of the gosh darn conversation. Stop bringing new crap up or starting a new story. Mother fricker will keep telling me new crap despite me having disappeared into my room. I don't even act interested. The dude just can't not talk. Someone mentioned body language clues being generally true but not universal. I suffer fairly bad anxiety in public spaces. I've been told by my friends that I look angry as I walk down the street. I've received looks from security staff in shops, maybe in my head because of the anxiety, etc., as I walk around the store looking shifty and darting my eyes everywhere until I settle down. I think I look everything but nervous. I'm sure most people have a more general character, and you can assume body language for them, but a good 10% must have less typical personality traits that affect their body language. If someone hugs you and then pats you on the back simultaneously, they're uncomfortable with hugging you. If you're having a conversation with a girl and some guy just comes in and interrupts the conversation, don't stay. In fact, walk away. If the girl doesn't like that guy, she'll automatically come looking for you. People will always revert back to someone they trust or are interested in. Health inspectors. What's the worst violation you've ever seen? Former inspector here, I once discovered a rat infestation in the kitchen of a hospital. They asked me if I could prove my suspicions, and I pointed out the numerous foodstuffs with 1 to 2 inch circular holes chewed in them, but they didn't seem convinced. I showed them the trail of droppings and footprints coming and going from a hole in the floor drain, but they still didn't seem convinced. I showed them the 3 dead rats I'd discovered under and around equipment. I think they began to believe me at that point. Citations included rat infestation and absolutely deplorable cleaning practices. Used to have a job working as an inspector for storage tanks at places like dairies and factories. Went to a cheesecake factory, an actual factory for cheesecakes, not the restaurant chain, to test a milk storage tank. It had just been cleaned and was being prepped to be filled with a tanker full of milk. I noticed the floor of the tank was covered in bleach. It turned out the floor manager couldn't be asked to spend the time sucking out the rest of the cleaning fluid used in the cleaning process and, as a standard, just filled the tank with milk on top of dozens of gallons of bleach. His theory was that there was enough milk to dilute the bleach to acceptable consumption levels. I wrote a report and he was promptly fired. By the way, my 12-gallon estimate is just that, an estimate. It was a huge milk storage silo, 40,000 litres if I recall, and roughly half an inch of the floor of the tank was covered in cleaning fluid. The dilutions we're talking about probably wouldn't have been harmful or even tasteable after being pasteurized and mixed with cheesecake ingredients. But that's also a guess, and it's also not the point. My gosh, you already went through the trouble of cleaning it. What the heck was an extra 5 minutes to properly finish the job? Glad he got fired. It was something to do with the extra attachment he'd need to use for the nozzle, or something. Either way, it would have been an extra 30 minutes of work. Something, had he observed, would have kept his job and a clean criminal record. In 2004, 2005, around that time, I drank some milk that had been in a similar situation. Machine wasn't rinsed after cleaning. I was a toddler and got hospitalized. How often does this crap happen? Worked in a restaurant. Sitting in the office one day, I hear an awful squeaking/shrieking noise. Took me a little while to find the source. The source turned out to be a mouse, stuck in some old spilled pancake syrup under a storage shelf, being eaten alive by the mouse stuck next to it. I have had to edit out the several minutes of gagging and string of expletives that I just uttered after imagining that story. You're welcome, viewers. Did food safety inspection at a large slaughterhouse for a while. We did our own inspections each shift and the government inspector stopped by once a day too. One day I came around a corner and one of the workers who was running service for the butchers had dropped a ham on the floor. So the proper way to handle this was for him to leave it there and call for a re-inspector to come pick it up, take it out to carve off any contaminated bits, and rinse it in boiling water. Now, it relatively often happened meat was dropped on the floor, it's just very, very hard to avoid it when running in a factory setting with human labor. So this was common. What was uncommon was what the guy did. First, he tried catching it as it fell, which would have been fine. No contact with any surface, and he could have just thrown it back into the tub it had fallen out of. He didn't catch it though, it landed on the floor. Thinking that no one was watching, he tried picking it up and dropped it again. He did this 3 times. So first and foremost, he's not supposed to be touching anything that's been on the floor. It cross-contaminates his hands, and he has nowhere to put the contaminated product anyway. But he did this 3 times and dropped it 3 times. Freshly carved hams can be slippery when wearing vinyl gloves. He then, out of pure frustration and annoyance at the unwieldy ham, dropped down on all 4s and proceeded to pick up the raw, freshly cut, 6-kilo ham by his teeth. Stood up, ham dangling from his chompers, and dropped it into the tub with around 600 kilos of product, and drove off with the tub for processing. He was fired a few minutes after that, and the entire tub of product was discarded. I followed him and let him park the tub before I did a very cliché type of scene. I wish you'd interrupted him while he had the ham in his mouth. Well, yes and no. Had he picked up the ham by his teeth and carried it to the grinder for disposal, technically he had just packed up contaminated product and had to change his clothes and gloves. Of course, carrying anything in your mouth, whatever it fricking is, doesn't fly. But a straight, no prior warning firing? I'm not so sure. Probably though, that wouldn't have been up to me. But when he put it in with the clean product and drove it off to processing, that shows a complete disregard for any sort of understanding of what you should and should not do when working with food. He had made the decision himself even before I dragged him into the office of the shift director. There was no other option. Not a health inspector, but a Chinese buffet near me was closed down because it got a 0 out of 5 in its inspection. I got food poisoning from there once. The staff just got up and left. Locked the door, never went back. All the food was still out and everything. A week later, a man was walking his dog past said Chinese buffet and heard a loud buzzing noise. Looked through the window to see hundreds of thousands of flies had taken to the building as their new home. Was so bad that Pizza Hut next door had to close too. To anyone asking, this was in Gloucester, England. God damn, get a flamethrower in there. Pools that have absolutely no chlorine. Pedicure tubs filters that have never been changed. All their disinfectants were expired. A restaurant that refused to clean up pest feces or urine and refused to properly reheat foods. The kitchen had exposed wood everywhere. Well, it would be exposed if there wasn't a thick layer of grease and no sanitizer. The pools that have no chlorine things happens all the time. As a former pool manager, I can tell you almost right away too when I get unchlorinated water. Chlorine is volatile and will dissipate quickly, especially when it's sunny out. If you're running an outdoor pool and not constantly monitoring the chlorine concentration and the feeds, it will turn into a pond in about 6 hours. At that point, you're just taking a bath with everyone in your town. Also, really shallow baby pool? You can be almost sure that at least once a day it has no chlorine in it. When you're dealing with less than 1,000 gallons, that thing will vacillate like crazy. Well, thank you for that. If you'll all excuse me, I'll just be busy never swimming again in another pool for the rest of my life. In fact, after reading most of these, maybe I'll just never leave my house. When my son was 5 or so, we had a nanny who used to look after him, and she used to take him to a local pub where one of her friends worked. He got used to sitting at the bar, eating a packet of crisps, and drinking a soda. I'm starting to realize as I recount this, as it doesn't reflect too well on my parenting skills. Oh well, he's 17 now, so I guess it's too late for social service to come and take him away. Anyway, the nanny was great, no matter what you might say. The nanny and her friend were round the corner in the other bar, chatting away, when a couple of besuited gentlemen wandered into the bar. My son was laying a line of crisps along the bar, and one of the gents started talking to him. It's worth noting that the regulars in the bar were used to him being there, and often referred to him as the boss. They let him pour drinks and so on, ostensibly under the supervision of the bar staff. Needless to say, it's illegal for 5-year-olds to be employed as bar staff, even in the UK. "I'm in charge here. Would you like a drink?" offered my son, scooting around the back of the bar. No, it's okay, thanks. What are the crisps for?" "Oh, I'm feeding my friend," my son replied. "Really? Where's your friend?" "He lives in that little hole." My son pointed to a hole in the wall toward the end of the bar. "And sometimes he comes out and I feed him." On cue, a small mouse appeared out of the hole, ran along the bar, and started eating the crisps. The men were environmental health officers. The pub was shut down that week and never reopened. Luckily, they weren't police, otherwise the nanny's friend would have been in serious trouble. This story was pieced together from the report of the nanny and also my son, who thought the whole thing was hilarious. The nanny's friend was quite relieved as she hated the job anyway. My favorite Chinese restaurant got shut down. My ex-wife worked for the city, and I asked her what the deal was. She said the health inspectors found something leaking from the ceiling. They lifted the ceiling tile and shined a flashlight and saw multiple eyes staring back at them. It was chickens. They were raising chickens in the ceiling, and chicken crap was dripping into the food that I had been eating at least once a week. How do I get out of this chicken crap outfit? You secure that crap, Hudson. My dad worked pest control, and after working that job, he can no longer eat Chinese food. He said that nearly every Chinese restaurant he had to work in was disgusting and crawling with roaches. But the one that took the cake was when he had to strip down in the kitchen after a ceiling tile broke and roaches fell into his overalls. My dad did pest control. I went to hang out with him one night, and he took me to a Chinese food restaurant. When we were done eating, he was lingering over his tea, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, looks like they're closing up soon. I think we're keeping the folks from getting done." He's cool and calm. It'll be fine. So we sit. He pays the bill, and we wait. Finally, they're shutting off the lights out front, and I'm losing my mind. I'm horrified, embarrassed, and I'm thinking, these poor people. Finally, Dad stands up and says, "Be right back." He comes back in with his gear. He proceeds to treat the place for their rat problem and the roaches. He gets me to help him carry and move stuff so he can do his job, and doesn't see any problem with this. In conclusion, Pest Control Dad treats a restaurant for nasties right after we eat there. My stepdad used to be a baker in an authentic recreation of an 18th century New French fortress. Because they sell bread to the public, the health inspector came by, and she was ripping into my stepdad for violations like the stonework walls, the doorless entryways, or the lack of mosquito zappers. He pointed out that they were following the highest standards except for things that would destroy the authenticity of his 18th century bakery. The health inspector relented and agreed to give him a pass after verifying the food storage area was secure. They went to the shed, which was a doorless building attached to the bakery. As the health inspector went in, there happened to be an escaped cow licking all the loaves. My stepdad could only say, honestly, this never happens. They passed the health inspection. In conclusion, health inspector witnesses escaped farm animal licking all the bread in a bakery and passes the health inspection anyway. Does your stepdad live in a sitcom? That would explain a lot. Like the laugh track that plays any time he cracks a joke, even if it starts only the two of you in the room. My name is Cow, and when at night, or when the moon is shining bright, and all the men have gone to bed, I stay up late, I lick the bread. My friend was inspecting a restaurant and walked out the back to find a man stirring a huge pot of curry, with his arm. No spoon or anything, just up to his hairy elbows in curry. I'd be more worried about how cold the curry is that he was able to stick his arm in it. Most people in the food industry have insane tolerance to heat. I've not worked in a commercial kitchen for some time, and I can still pick up a pan out of the oven with my fingertips for a brief period of time. Can confirm, people would warn me that something was too hot to touch, and I'd be like, it's cool, I have waitress hands. Or alternatively, fire cannot kill the dragon. I like to think it's more a case of working in the service industry kills your will to live, so you become indifferent to the plates burning your hands. As a man with asbestos hands, I can confirm, coffee machines, kitchens, and hot plates will give you a D&D-style fiendish resistance to fire. However, on the topic of stirring curry with one's own arm, you are likely better off leaving it to tools. Unless you're the following commenters. Is there a different way to stir curry? Well, only if you're really well hung. I had a health inspector tell me this story. There was a family in which both the elderly mother and a handicapped sibling used wheelchairs. Another sibling lived in the house with them and did all the driving, etc. The health department got a phone call from the local wheelchair company. The brother stopped by and picked up a new, custom-built wheelchair for his sister and for his mother, and returned within about 30 minutes, saying that the sister's wheelchair hadn't been made to the right specifications. It was too small. After he left, the staff noticed several roaches on the chair, so the guy got a call. Apparently, it was summer, Midwest, both hot and humid, and the house was all locked up with no open windows for ventilation, curtains drawn, etc. The inspector entered the house and said it was so stifling hot that he started to get dizzy, and he thought hallucinate. He said there was a sound like leaves rustling in the fall, and the walls and floors were kind of vibrating. He then realized it was because they were literally covered in roaches. He immediately evacuated the 3 people living there, and the next day they tented and sprayed the house. He went in a Tyvek suit and knee-high rubber boots, and said that the dead roaches were about 2.5 feet deep in most parts of the house. I work in a bar in Japan that was connected to a bowling alley and an A&W. Mostly Japanese work there. I'm American, and that place was spotless. Every night at 11 when they left there, they were scrubbing everything. I almost stepped on a guy cleaning the baseboards. You could taste the difference in the food because they kept everything so nice. My girlfriend started working in a frozen yogurt shop. The first week, she decided to clean the yogurt machine one night. The entire inside tank was covered in slimy green and brown mold. Oh, and the shop next door was a hoity-toity gym that catered to mirror-gazing health nut gym rats that just loved that low-cal slime mold yogurt. I haven't eaten frozen yogurt since. When I went to culinary school, one of the professors made the statement, "If you want to know how clean a restaurant's kitchen is, go to the bathroom first before you're seated. If the bathroom is dirty, there's a good chance the kitchen is in the same condition." This is what I do when I enter dives. It's a hell of a lot harder to clean a kitchen than a restroom. If you can't do that, you can be damn sure they don't give a frick about the difficult stuff. While this works for restaurants, it does not work for bars or pubs, except at 11 a.m. A pub's restroom goes really filthy about 15 minutes after the drinking starts. There's dirty, and then there's dirty. Superficial, day-old dirt looks quite different from consistent neglect. Not a health inspector, but my mum used to work at this restaurant where the owner just did not give a crap. It was a Mexican restaurant, and my mum told me once that a lady came in asking for caldo de res, a beef soup, but they didn't have any more meat, at least the one that's used for that dish. They were about to let the lady know when the owner stepped up and told the lady that her food would be right out. The server and my mum were both confused as to what she was going to do. Well, this lady goes and literally digs through the fricking trash and pulls out some beef, some still with bone, and then she ran it through water, cooked it, and served it to that poor lady. My mum says the lady was even sucking the bone and she almost felt sick watching. My mum quit that job soon after. After writing this, I asked my mum again about it, and here is what she said. The bone/meat was not raw, it was left over from people who had ordered the same thing. They'd almost run out of that soup, and all the meat was gone, so they thought they couldn't serve anymore. The owner grabbed the bone from the trash, rinsed it and threw it back in what was left of the soup, heated up for a bit, and just served it. Just thought I needed to clarify this. I've worked at places that have gotten 100% on multiple occasions. The inspectors are usually the same few people in smaller areas and get to know people in the restaurants. If you have a good reputation, they come in and check the basics, give you a couple of soft infractions, and move on. If you have something that is a major violation, they will start to, rightfully, nitpick everything. I'm hearing a ton of horror stories and just want to point out something about my experience. I've worked at places the inspectors were easy on because they knew it was clean and had a good reputation. I've worked at one place that ended up having to get a follow-up and quit it soon after. That was the only time I'd seen anything too sketchy. I also worked at a place that regularly got 100% ratings, and let me tell you, we were not 100%. The owner wouldn't do crap to improve conditions either. Mice, several kind of bugs, ceiling literally leaking nasty-ass water, on some areas onto the food prep areas, and once the walk-in cooler broke for an entire 24-hour period, and he said to just keep the food like it didn't happen. If my experience in the restaurant business has told me anything, it's that all restaurants are freaking disgusting. But they won't get you sick most of the time, so if you don't think about it, it'll all be okay. Yep, I've worked in places that honestly were bursting at the seams with unsafe and unsanitary infractions just waiting to happen. Worked in some of them for years and somehow never saw a report on them. I worked as an assistant cook in a restaurant. 2 weeks into the job, I opened a cupboard to get a can of tomato sauce, and I see a huge tarantula scuttling away behind the cans. I told the boss what I'd seen, so that maybe we should get someone to deal with the huge spider living in the kitchen. Boss turns to me and says, "I see you've met Eduardo. Just don't put your hand too close to him, and you'll be good." Later, another cook proceeded to tell me that the spider had been living in there for 2 years, and they allowed it because it kept the rodents and roaches away. This is a true story, so know this. Every time you think about swatting a spider, remember that there's a possibility that a friendly spider is guarding your favorite restaurant's food against nasty critters. The spiders in my house and I have a verbal agreement that is pasted onto every generation of spider that takes up residency in my house. You may remain in my house as long as you don't come upstairs and you keep the ants, flies, and other household bugs that aren't you out of my house. I reserve the right to eliminate you and your webs at will without proper notice. I haven't had an ant in 4 years. I've had a few flies, but they seem to only be upstairs where the spiders aren't allowed. I've killed very few spiders. It's a good arrangement. Not a health inspector, but I've witnessed some things at my first job as a setup waitress at a banquet hall. The head cook had some hairy arms and he always mixed the salad with his hands. So you know that hair is getting in there, and one day we found a used Band-Aid in the salad. I survived the assassination attempt. My stepmother is the lead health inspector for a decent-sized suburban town. While I've never asked what the worst thing she witnessed as part of her job was, I do know that one instance was pretty gross. A truck full of lobsters was traveling down the highway and crashed. The police came and eventually they towed the truck. As a Board of Health inspector, my stepmother was consulted to see if any of the lobsters were viable, and she told them no. The load is a total loss since there were literally lobsters scattered across the highway covered in dirt and sand, etc. Fast forward 24 hours and one of the restaurants in town ran a special, twin lobsters for $19. Apparently the owner of the trucking and towing company knew the restaurant owner pretty well, so they made a deal whereby the restaurant would pay a very discounted price for the road lobsters. The restaurant would turn around and illegally serve the lobsters to unsuspecting customers or sell them out of a truck behind the restaurant. I'm not sure what the repercussions were, but I think they were shut down for like a week. They closed shortly thereafter, and now there's a new restaurant there. The towing company lost their contract to tow vehicles and semi-trucks with the town and the state. It's crazy that they didn't think the health inspector would figure it out. It's their job. Mysteriously cheap lobster after a huge highway crash involving lobsters? I thought that there would be insurance for things like lobster crashes. And now I realize how ridiculous that was as I typed it. Never mind. You aren't covered for lobster crashes on your insurance plan? Weird. Insurance agent here. If you buy lobster crash insurance, we will find a way to not pay anything at all. It was an act of cod. Close enough. Talking 10 years as an inspector. Most dangerous is usually not the most disgusting. I've seen entire walk-in coolers at 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and the staff didn't even notice anything wrong. I've seen piles of mice that died getting stuck in grease behind the fryer. I've seen staff throwing raw burgers within the grill, then making a salad right after with their bare hands. I've seen squirrels and birds roaming freely inside a bread manufacturer. The stereotypes, unfortunately, are true. Chinese restaurants are almost always filthy. The most common critical violation? Dish machine not sanitizing properly. Non-Americans. What misconception did you have about America before visiting or moving there? Well, I recently learned that New York is a state as well as a city, and Washington isn't in Washington. A while back I was dating this girl from India who was shocked to discover that Seattle was nowhere near DC. The best part about the naming of Washington State is that it was going to be called Columbia, but people at the time thought it would be too confusing, given that the nation's capital was the District of Columbia. This was before DC was mostly known as Washington, so they picked Washington for the state name instead of Columbia. To avoid confusion. My German friends wanted to go into my arsenal and start shooting with all my pieces. When I told them that I didn't have any, they looked at me like I was lying. I've taken several Germans to the range. It's a pretty awesome experience for them. I don't think they really grasp how bloody expensive the ammo is, though. I don't know if it's a misconception, but I expected Grand Canyon National Park to be less well maintained. Frankly, it's amazing for the amount of visitors. Visited last year, 10 out of 10. You people have an amazing national park service. This year we decided to come back and tackle Yellowstone, next weekend actually. Hats off to the national parks. That is some public sector crap I hope you people decide to keep investing in. For me, more than cities, they are the crown jewels of the US. The amount of public land in the US is unique and incredible. Thank Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir. They were both amazing men that pioneered the vast national parks of North America. It's true, despite the efforts of certain monetarily motivated entities seemingly working as hard as they can to gut the EPA and park services, America still has some incredibly well-maintained hiking trails and natural wonders. Long may they last. This one's a bit off-topic, but hear me out. I grew up watching American movies, American media, American everything, and it became this very familiar place that I'd never been to, and it almost seemed like it was fake, like it was all just one big movie set, and people spoke a made-up language I understood but never heard from native speakers in real life. At that point, my view on America was almost disconnected from reality. When finally visiting America, it was completely surreal. Like I was taking part of those fictional movies I'd seen as a kid. I saw landmarks in cities I had only ever seen on screen. It was a crazy experience. I get that. Even for Americans, there are places in the US that can be like that, especially New York City. I thought you Americans ate pizza every Friday. That's why I wanted to go to the USA in the first place. It's America. You can eat pizza every day. And when pizza's on a bagel, you can eat pizza anytime. I thought sheriffs aren't real for some reason, at least not anymore. At least where I am, police equals city, sheriff equals county, state patrol equals state, but mostly highways and interstates. We have a lot of overlapping law enforcements with weird jurisdiction lines and different protocols. Like where I am in California, in a day you might see highway patrol, county sheriff, and the city police department. In lots of places, sheriffs are more likely to use SUVs, while with PD, SUVs are normally for K9, but some departments are using them as well. Being English, I didn't even think about a language barrier. At a football game, it took me about 5 minutes to get a bottle of water. The girl just couldn't understand how I said water. I had to point to one someone else had in the end. I'm just sitting here giggling and picturing an extremely frustrated Brit standing at a concession stand just repeating "water, water" over and over again in a fruitless attempt to get a damn drink. It happens to everyone. I'm from Ohio and I went to visit my aunt and uncle in Georgia. I was trying to order a sandwich, but I couldn't understand the question that the waitress was asking me because I couldn't decipher her accent. My sister had to translate for me. It was pretty embarrassing now that I'm thinking about it. Y'all want mustard and mayonnaise on it? I thought people would say yee-haw a lot more. I'm sorry to disappoint. We failed our jobs as Americans, and I deeply apologize. Oh, and yee-haw. My brother in Connecticut deals with people in China and other countries from work all the time, and he started greeting everyone with howdy, specifically in order to perpetuate the stereotype. Honestly, you guys were a lot friendlier than I expected. Even in New York, which seems to pride itself on not giving a frick, I found people to be extremely friendly, polite, and helpful. It's been great hearing everyone's take on this, and now I have a long list of places to visit in America. Fellow New Yorker here can confirm we do give a frick. Quickest way to get a New Yorker to talk to you, you stare at a subway map for more than a minute. The one thing that breaks us out of our do not talk to strangers shell is when helping with directions. I swear, if you ask the quickest way to get to the Empire State Building, 3 of us will jump in front of you to make sure you get there, and 2 of us may debate about which way to go, even though both of our directions are right and it would take the exact same time. If we're really friendly, we'll even give you a tip to skip the Empire State Building altogether and head to the top of the rock. Better views, no chain link fence, and you can actually get that picture in front of the Empire State Building. Something you can't do when you're standing on top of that building. You can also ask, hey, does this train go to 34th Street? Just to get us talking. Honestly, I think that a lot of the infamous East Coast and New York surliness goes out the window when people realize you're British or European as well. But maybe that was an isolated experience for me. I didn't realize those red cups were actually real and used by everyone in the US at parties. I thought it was just like a movie thing. My mum's friend went to the US and brought us back a stack while we were at university. We felt like we were in a teen film, and we even washed them up when we were done so we could use them again. I thought that I'd have no problem communicating because the people there speak a form of English. I've listened to their accents in my media the whole life, etc. Man, was I wrong. I don't think I spoke to a single person who I didn't have to ask to repeat themselves at least once. This was in Orlando. Oh, this sounds stupid. I knew America was big, but when I thought I could drive from New York to Florida pretty easily, I was so wrong. I just didn't quite register how bloody far away everything is. And I was wrong when I thought alligators just lived in the Everglades. Those frickers are everywhere in Florida. How surprisingly cold some parts of Arizona can get. I visited after spending a year in northern Ohio and basically went there naked, as I didn't expect anything could be worse than Cleveland's winter. Nope, I almost froze to death when I went to see the Grand Canyon and it was snowing. Yes, when I went to the Grand Canyon in October, I showed up in shorts and a tank top, expecting it to be still and hot, like I was in Phoenix. Nope. Not only was it freezing, but it was the windiest place I've been in my entire life. So beautiful, though. When my parents and I moved from Poland to Texas in 1997, we had no idea Daisy sour cream wasn't a cheese spread. Still have it on sandwiches. On a solo road trip up Route 66, I picked up an 18-year-old Dutch kid on his first trip out of his country. He thought all American diners were owned by one company called Diner. That was pretty adorable. My grandmother was an impressionable small-town teenager in the UK during World War II and fell in love with her fair share of American GIs as there were hundreds stationed in her hometown. They took her to dances, swept her off her feet, and left her with a hugely romantic view of life in the USA, bolstered over the years by movies. In 2003, my family took her to Florida on holiday and she was devastated that everyone lived normal lives. Ah, that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said about Florida. Thanks! Living in Florida makes me wonder if I'm normal or just less insane than the other residents. I thought Washington was the most serious place in the States, but when I went there for a tour in the White House about 3 years ago, most of the city smelled like green herb. I was very confused. After several replies to my story, I need to clarify I was talking about Washington, D.C. Didn't think it was necessary since I mentioned the White House. I do apologize for any confusion. People think DC equals government, which it does, but they also forget it's an incredibly liberal population. I don't know the numbers now, but it also used to be the gayest city in America by percentage of population, and we know how to party. You get a lot of high-strung young professionals, and they have to blow off steam somehow. People might not believe that DC consistently votes in the 85 to 92% range in favor of the Democratic candidates in each presidential election, regardless of who's currently in office or who the candidates are. I'm not saying that the Dems get 90% more or double the votes than the Republicans. I'm saying that 90% of all votes tallied in the district are in favor of the Democratic candidate. DC is crazy liberal. I got an admit to a school in Texas. I was worried about all the six-shooter slinging cowboys and random shootouts everywhere. 4 years in, and I'm yet to see any of those guys here. I did get to go to a firearms range last year, though. I had an exchange student from Europe recently, and he said his mom said she'd be happy as long as he ended up anywhere in the US except Texas. I live in New Orleans, like in the city. His mom was still happy it wasn't Texas. He said he'd fill her in on the actual danger to him in New Orleans versus Texas when he went home. I visited New York City and had the expectation that everyone would be rushing around and keeping to themselves, but people were so friendly. Like several times a day, girls stopped me in the street simply to say something nice about my hair or outfit. I just found it really strange, but nice. I'm from London, UK, and I guess I'm just used to people avoiding eye contact or talking to strangers. The only downside was the catcalling was heavy and more aggressive than I've experienced anywhere else. I've only been to New York City, LA, Vegas, and Florida, but I've generally always found Americans to be really pleasant and polite. I've had to rethink just how antisocial we are in a lot of Northern European and British cities. Perhaps even if New York is unfriendly by US standards, it's still worlds ahead of Britain in acknowledging people around you. That it was a big country. It's not. It's insanely vast. Stupidly vast. Beyond anything I can compare it to. Returning to the UK after a trip to the US, it feels like I'm visiting Toy Town and everything is just so cute. And I'm English and feel like this after a week or two away. Also, people are a lot less fat than we're led to believe. Yeah, there's some obesity, but no more than I see here in the UK. I also felt massively safer driving in the US than I do in the UK. People seem to drive with a lot more patience and there's a lot less under or overtaking. In the UK, at any given moment, someone is planning to cut you up or is actively swearing at you a car away for being either too fast or too slow, or not pulling away from the red light the instant it turns amber. Yeah, a lot of people underestimate the physical size of the country. It's common in conversations about travel for Americans to point out the ease of traveling in Europe. Americans don't understand how you can hit 2 to 3 countries in a day or for a weekend. Europeans don't understand that you can drive for 8 hours through Texas and still be in Texas. The East Coast with the smaller states are easier to travel through with transit, but once you get west of DC or Maryland, there isn't transit connecting cities. It's plane, car, or if you're severely unlucky, Greyhound bus or rail. My friend's wife is from Costa Rica. She was shocked to find out that Americans take regular showers when she moved here. I guess most of the Americans she was exposed to growing up were the backpack Costa Rica hippie types who didn't clean themselves much. Thought food was going to be crap for some reason, then discovered that the quality was way better than what I'm used to. Also thought everyone was going to be morbidly obese. Came to Colorado, and 90% of people are fit as frick. I thought Walmart was going to suck. I ended up loving Walmart. I also didn't know Colorado was the fittest state before coming to the US. I know now. As someone from somewhere else in America, I just had the same experience on my first trip to the Rockies. Retirees trail running past us up a 45-degree grade at 10,000 feet above sea level. Wow. I thought that WrestleMania was a huge deal for Americans. I was hoping that it would be like a national holiday. WrestleMania and NASA are my 2 favorite things about America. So this was very sad for me. Vince McMahon would like to have a word with you about an exciting offer that only costs $9.99 a month. Met a guy from Portugal in Portland, Oregon. He said he was surprised that he hasn't seen anyone get shot in the street yet. He assumed everyone in America carried a piece, and street shootings were extremely common. I'm curious, did he think that they were Western-style shootouts, or more like just random acts of violence? Hell, I'm from Idaho and went to New York for Comic-Con, and got asked how I liked the modern tech available in the city. I was confused until we talked more and realized that he thought we didn't have electricity or cars, and that I used a 6-shooter to shoot coyotes trying to get at my cows. It's not just non-Americans. Not really a misconception, but I was pretty young when I moved to the US from mainland Europe. My parents mentioned that the US was at war with Iraq. This was in 2003, and I was wondering to myself why we were moving to a war zone. I thought there would be air raids and bombings all the time. When I was very young, I thought English people lived in castles and rode horses and went to war with bows and arrows. I didn't understand that the movies I saw were portraying historical England, not contemporary England. That's what they actually do. When you travel to England, they'll take you to the special places for tourists, where they maintain the appearance of a modern lifestyle. However, it's all a big conspiracy because they don't let the tourists go to the real places where the English live in castles and ride horses. Their maps are fake, public transport is rigged, every inhabitant of England is sworn to maintain the secrecy of their true lifestyle. That everyone is as good-looking as the people on TV. We are, but that show is Roseanne. To appreciate the quality of this joke, I had to Google image the show Roseanne, and I guess the joke is that most of you basically look like normal people. Zing. Hollywood. I believed it was wall-to-wall famous people, walking on red carpets dressed in golden gowns, and everything was possible if you just walked on that beautiful boulevard. Wrong. Big time. There was nothing, and I mean nothing worse than when we had out-of-town family visit us, fam lives in SoCal, LA area, and begged to be taken to Hollywood so they could see the Walk of Fame, etc. Even after explaining that it's a dump, they always insisted. And then we'd get there and they'd see what we were talking about, and we'd have to claw our way out after 30 minutes. That area is horrible in the summer. Traffic going in and out is impossible, everything is overpriced, and it's filthy as heck. I had to work for an event designer out there for a year, and that drive was part of the reason I quit so soon. I love LA and all the cities in it, but Hollywood and Venice Beach can go get screwed. That every shop is like Costco, big in bulk and relatively cheap. That the majority of people in the US are fat, racist, and selfish motherfrickers. I couldn't be more wrong. Everyone was very nice, educated, and kind. Unfortunately, the worst people get the most attention inside and outside the US. Rednecks and hillbillies. I thought that it was a geographical thing and you can only see them in the South. The ones I met up north were pretty hostile at first, but turned out to be awesome people in the end. I thought Americans, especially Californians, are sassy and snobbish. I was so wrong about that. They're freaking chill, friendly, and some are really down to earth. I also thought that most are really rich and that they own mansions with swimming pools at the mountains of Hollywood, but no. Most of them live in apartments and houses. My big misconception was I thought life was easy here, that you don't have to do 2 to 4 jobs just to make a lot of money, but unfortunately it was the other way. When I was in high school, a friend's older sister had a German student and a British student visit for Thanksgiving. They were students with her at UT. It was so much fun talking to them about the US and answering all their questions. The best, though, was their questions on the states. They thought Chicago was a state, and were surprised to learn Hawaii and Alaska were states as well. They thought they were a step up from Puerto Rico, but they were surprised to learn they also had representatives and senators. From the outside, the US looked like one country. Once you're there and drive around multiple states, it more seems like many different countries with different accents, laws, regulations, way of life, food. That was a big surprise for me. Misconceptions before moving to America. 1. Americans only work 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. 2. No one works after 12 on Fridays. 3. Americans take a lot of vacations, summer plus Thanksgiving plus Christmas. After moving to America, 1. Everyone is working their butts off. 2. The concept of fixed hours is fuzzy, people log in early and late to get to important stuff at work, and 3. Americans are not getting much time off. Most are not even using their vacation days. I was told the typical stuff before going to the US the first time. The TSA are buttholes, everyone carries a piece, and people are hella unfriendly. I saw more pieces in Schiphol in Amsterdam than I did in O'Hare. Seriously, police with MP5s about every 30 feet. Dogs as well. Very weird. Also, O'Hare freaking stinks. Worst airport in the world. Anyway, yeah, I realize mileage may vary with the TSA, but everyone was friendly, interested in my trip in a good way, and helpful. No issues. Spoke to a police officer like an hour later, super friendly and helpful as well. I was starving, he showed me a good place to eat, and had food himself as well. We talked a bit while eating. Cool guy. Everyone was super talkative and friendly in the US. The talkative part is weird, coming from Sweden. I got compliments on my shirt within an hour of leaving the airport after my second in-country flight. That would basically never happen in Sweden. People here dislike social interaction. In the US, it was like free-for-all talking, joking, and complimenting each other. It was nice. As a resident Swede, this is all completely true for those of us who visit the States from here, as I've alluded to in my previous comments. Having strangers talk to you in a friendly manner is genuinely mind-blowing to us who live here. I've lived in the US permanently since 2015, but I've been coming regularly, 3 to 6 month visits, since 2010. As an Englishman, I signed up for the two main stereotypes pre-2010. 1. That all Americans are incredibly obnoxious and loud in public. 2. That everyone in America is a mixture of stupid and fat. Since then, I've evolved my thinking, to say the least. 1. They're really not obnoxious, nor are they loud in public. English people are just painfully awkward and shy, hence the crappy handshakes, the lack of eye contact, and the "speak up, you bellend" mumbling of words in public. Trust me, you start to notice this behavior when you've had something to contrast it with. 2. Obviously there are stupid people here, but that is true of any country. It's worth pointing out that I've yet to meet a group of people or a set of individuals as stupid or as cringe-inducing as the people I grew up with in the northwest of England, and I've travelled throughout the south and gone from coast to coast. For instance, I've never once had to explain what a bachelor's degree is in the good old US of A. That was a weekly occurrence after I graduated uni in England. The fat thing is also a bit of a reach too. Americans are typically more health conscious from my experience. I officially became an American a few years ago, but before I first came to the country, I used to believe that American streets would be cleaner than clean and paved with gold. I'm originally from Jamaica. Our streets, back then, were not always as presentable. Then again, it also depends on which area of Jamaica you resided, worked, etc. Anyway, I thought American streets or roads were yellow brick road immaculate. Not sure why I believed that, it wasn't true. They're just as normal as other streets. But I tell you what, it blew my mind when I first saw a street sweeper. That was awesome. I ran into some dude outside of the States that asked me why Americans eat dogs. After maybe not understanding my "what the frick" look for a while, he then asked what hot dogs were. So at the very least I was able to explain, in freedom terms, what God's gift to man is. Hot dogs. What's the most real relationship advice you can give? It's fine to not always want to spend 100% of your time with your spouse. Not every moment of every day is going to be bliss, and sometimes it really takes some effort. I love my wife to bits, but there are some days when I would just like to do things by myself. It doesn't mean our relationship isn't great, but it can be really refreshing just to take a stroll around a shopping center, or go get some food alone or something. This 100%. My spouse goes to a weekly Pathfinder game. That's his alone time. I occasionally go to a punk show or have a beer with my friends. It can be even simpler. I will go read a book in the other room and get my alone time. He likes to cook, so he'll start up in the kitchen and I stay away while he listens to his music. Everyone needs alone time. Don't lose yourself as an individual in a relationship. Happened to me. Where were you 10 years ago? Ah, but would you have listened 10 years ago? I think it's so important to have your own social lives and circles, but I see so many couples who bring their partner to everything, to the point that they're basically a part of every social group that person is in. Where does that person then have an escape to? When can they go out with their friends without the other one feeling bad for not being invited? Keep your own circle. My partner and I have been friends for years, even before we were a couple, so we have the same friend group. I combat this by asking when he wants me to tag along to outings like shopping, and also we have pretty chill home life. Also, we're not attached at the hip at events, and I know when to step back and let him have one-on-one conversations. I try and let him know that it's okay for us to do our own thing and I won't be offended. Sometimes I worry that I'm too much and we're not getting enough alone time, but we communicate well and respect each other. So if it ever becomes an issue, it wouldn't be one for too long. Communication is key. Make sure you're talking to your partner and finding out what they need and telling them your needs too. Intimacy is way more important than people realize. Like I've told my wife, yeah, sure, there's lust involved, but there's also interest in making your partner feel good as well. If that interest isn't there, your partner might as well be an adult fun time toy for all they mean to you. This is where I think a lot of people miss the point. Everyone seems to automatically infer that it's physical intimacy that's important. Intimacy is emotional. It's meaningful and vulnerable sharing of one's inner self. It's not what you do in bed. That's not hard. Real intimacy is hard. and it's super fulfilling to be intimate with your partner. So important, and physical intimacy begets emotional intimacy. Physical intimacy is our biggest way of being there for each other. Everyone needs a hug, everyone needs cuddles. Words can't always do what a good, genuinely loving hug can do. Go on holiday together. If you can agree on food, sleep soundly, compromise on activities, and do your own thing one of the days, and not get mad at each other, you stand a good chance of lasting a while. I love my boyfriend to bits and miss him a lot. We don't live together yet, but boy do I like sleeping in my own bed sometimes. Space is healthy. Just because you're in a relationship, it doesn't mean you have to live in each other's pockets. Given the sheer amount of friends that I've discovered I can't stand traveling with, finding someone to meet this comment's criteria seems impossible. Oh dear. When you disagree, remember that you're on the same team. You're supposed to fight a problem, not the other person.
This is such an awesome way of putting that concept. 1. Don't expect the other person to be able to read your mind. 2. Be a team, not opponents. 3. Everybody toots at some point.
Number 3 has been a hard thing for me during my current relationship. My significant other has a colostomy bag after battling colon cancer, which has been a huge learning experience in itself. I'm all for being comfortable with the body and all of its weird, icky processes, and I'm usually quick to make that known. But knowing that he physically can't toot makes me way more reluctant to do it around him. Like, I don't want to be a show-off, you know?
My husband blames his toots on the baby sometimes, and for some reason I think it's hilarious to imagine a 7-month-old making that kind of gas.
I know I found the right person. It wasn't easy though, damn. Communication is the foundation upon which everything else is built. They say don't go to bed angry, not because anger does something while you're sleeping, but because it means you didn't communicate properly and you're giving up on trying. Be calm, actively listen, do not dismiss your partner's statements, assume good faith. It's you and me versus the problem, not me versus you. If something's bugging you, talk to your significant other about it. If you feel enraged about something, wait until you're well-fed, well-rested, with warm extremities before talking about it, but talk about it at the first opportunity, calmly, rationally, and honestly. Keep the discussion limited to that one narrow thing. If something's bugging your significant other, hear them out. Never think, well, I'm not bothered by that, so it's not a problem. Think, my significant other is bothered by this, and that's a problem. If you think the concern is unreasonable, frame the discussion as solving the problem of your significant other is being unhappy. The worst fights and arguments happen over trivial things because it's not the trivial thing that's actually causing the problem. It's probably a series of things or a general lack of satisfaction, and the toothpaste cap being left off is just the instigator of the fight. If you communicate often and openly, these things will not fester, they won't pile up, and you won't get into such fights. Your spouse isn't going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. There will be mistakes and misunderstandings. What really matters in a relationship is not being perfect, but how you handle the imperfections of yourself and your spouse in a respectful, reasonable way. Learning how to be bored together is important. You don't have to be on the go, doing stuff and planning stuff and being fun and exciting all the time. It's okay to just sit around and not do anything and not talk to each other. It's not unhealthy, I promise.
This was one of the biggest things I learned when I moved in with my significant other, and what I give as advice to couples just moving in. Especially when it's their first time living with a significant other, you have to learn how to be in the same room without actively hanging out together. When your whole relationship has been dates, it's hard to just be, without feeling like you should be interacting. Getting comfortable just chilling there, doing your own thing, is a good thing. There's so much pressure to do stuff, especially in the age of social media. Other couples do stuff all the time, and everyone is looking for adventures. We must keep up with the carefully manufactured images of other people put out on Instagram. In reality, it's not necessary and can often be a serious source of stress. My husband has been playing Ark all day, and I've been on Reddit or playing The Sims. We watched a couple of episodes of 10th Kingdom earlier, and that's all we've done together today. We're in the same room, but we're not doing the same things. This is not a bad thing. It's called being comfortable together. As someone who just started an official relationship, I got a glimpse of this when I went to visit my boyfriend's place about a week ago. I asked if I could try Overwatch on his PC, since I only have the console version, and he seemed happy to let me go ahead and do my own thing. He booted up Diablo on the couch, and I played a couple of matches. I asked him, "Are you sure this is okay? I can totally get off and spend time with you." He replied, "You're enjoying yourself, right? I'm totally cool just doing my own thing. Just because one of us visits doesn't mean we have to spend every minute together." It made sense when he put it like that, and actually depicts what I've heard about other relationships even when the couples aren't cohabiting.
A relationship where I can just be okay playing Baldur's Gate for several hours at a time seems pretty damn good to me. That's the goal. It's interesting when people get confused by this. I always considered relationships to be autonomous. We should both be able to live our own lives, but us being together makes it better. At the same time, romantic relationships are just that. You should be dating your best friend. Your best friends sometimes do nothing with each other. My friend and I once got into a study room after class and did our homework for literally 2 hours with minimal talking. I looked at her around 1 in the afternoon and asked if she's hungry, and we grabbed lunch. It's kind of the same thing. You have to be honest with them, especially when it's hard to do. Me and my boyfriend get uncomfortably real with each other sometimes, and something we've both learned is to listen to criticism without getting defensive. And when giving criticism, we don't attack each other, no matter how angry or sad we are at each other. I've had him call me out for certain behaviors that nobody has ever called me out on, and I've done the same for him. We're both better people for it because when we get it all out on the table, we have no choice but to work on ourselves. There's a reason it's called the honeymoon phase, and eventually you won't have as much to talk about other than how the day went, or might not always feel those butterflies in your stomach when you think about them. That's when it becomes a test in the relationship, and you both have to work on it to make it work. You'll get into fights, but learn to get over them, or I doubt it will last. Resentment can kill feelings for someone. I wanted to add, I'm not a love or relationship expert by any means. I'm just going off things I've seen and gone through with my own husband. You trade butterflies for familiarity, excitement for comfort. I love the comfort stage. The butterflies are great and all, but being in a constant state of infatuation would get exhausting after a few years. It's so nice to do absolutely nothing with your person, or not see them for a day or two if you don't live together, and still be completely content with them. In an ideal relationship, the contributions are 60-40, where both partners are the ones trying to give 60%. My mom asked an elderly couple who'd been married for decades what their secret was. They said that they act as if being nice to each other is a competition. That's always stuck with me. I've been married for 28 years. When I was engaged, a dear lady, then in her 80s and still very much in love with her husband of 60+ years, told me this: "Just because he's your husband, don't think he requires less regard than your friends. Before you yell at him for something, anything, ask yourself if you would yell at your friend for the same thing." What she was trying to say is that being married, together, is not a free pass to stop being a decent human being. You're going to get annoyed by the socks on the floor, but is it an excuse to fly off the handle? Respect and common courtesy are my recommendation, and you don't need to keep score. There's no winner. I can't praise this enough. I see couples snap at each other all the time over the silliest stuff and wonder how it must feel to be constantly on guard like that. Just be nice to each other. If you can't stand to be nice to each other, call it a day, man. Life is too short. My husband and I have to check in on each other every once in a while. For some reason, it seems like I'm meaner to my husband when my family is around, and he's meaner to me when his family is around. We come up with a phrase that we whisper if we're in public: "Quit being a butthole." We use it to remind each other to be nice without having to justify ourselves at the moment. It really works because if he says it to me, I automatically check myself, even if I don't think I'm being mean. I love him and I never intend on coming off as a butthole. Listen to them, communicate with them, compromise sometimes, and frick them regularly. To elaborate on compromise, it doesn't always mean something we'll both enjoy. At times, it will very likely mean today we do something that my partner likes and that I sparingly tolerate, but tomorrow that reverses. My ex refused to see that side of a compromise. I would see horror films with her, because to me, spending time with her was more important than avoiding seeing a horror film. If I wanted to see a film that she wouldn't like, asking her to see it with me was forcing her to do something that she didn't want, and was therefore unfair. And for the love of God, do not start dating a new person as a way to get out of a bad relationship. That is extremely unfair to the new person you entered into a relationship with. Guy here, this probably sounds simple, but here's what I've learned. Know yourself, where you're at in life. If you're in a crap storm, legal crap, money crap, substances and booze crap, legal crap, you're probably not ready for anything serious. Clean up your act first. Be honest. No matter how fricked up your crap is, if you want to move forward in a serious way, all the cards have got to be on the table. Take it slow, get to know each other, but in the end, no secrets. There is some crap that's nobody's business, but I'm not talking about that. Know her, what she's been through, and what she wants out of life. You both need to be pretty much on board. You need to be heading for the same thing. Kids, buy a house, or gypsy life, doesn't matter. Keep an eye on things. You need to make sure she's doing okay, and let her know you're doing okay. Same with her to you. After that, it's just dodging stupid. Sometimes you have to spend years with crappy people to realize what you deserve. It was never a waste, you needed the experience to figure out what works best for you or what to avoid. You'll never forget your exes, they were there for a reason. Good to get something from the School of Hard Knocks on here. A lot of these is from people who seem to have been happily married or together for a long time. Sometimes you have to muddle your way through until it works. Relationships are work. They aren't always fun, you won't always be madly in love, and you can't put them on a shelf and ignore them. No, but you shouldn't shun the work. Too many of my friends are toxic in their relationships, ending them summarily just because any work is seen as too much. Or let relationships turn toxic because it's easier than maintaining healthy ones. Always be mindful and thoughtful to that person's love map. Like they might need a quick text every morning when you get to work letting them know that you're safe. It makes zero sense to you, but knowing it's something small and means the world to them, well, why the hell not? They might get stressed out, and you helping clean the house for when they finished work might mean more to them than someone else you've been with who wanted flowers to show love. Know what it is that your partner loves and make them feel loved too. And if it's just a text to say you love them and you're safe, it's a 10-second message to type. For frick's sake, that's so little time in the span of an entire day. Why not do it if you know that it makes them happy? A little off topic, but I've found that prioritizing the relationship correctly helps a lot. My roommate is my best friend, but he's a roommate first, a coworker second, and a friend third. We talk about finances and housework completely differently than we shoot the crap. This helps maintain efficient lines of communication regardless of what's going on. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. If they're mean, if they're vindictive, if they use you, if they show you that they don't really care about you, believe them. If they make you feel inadequate, on edge, scared, nervous, unworthy, or like a disappointment, believe them. If they're entitled, narcissistic, sociopathic, manipulative, or unfair, believe them. Life isn't a movie, and you can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. More often than not, they're just who they are. So take off the rose-colored glasses and stop thinking love will find a way. If it isn't working, change it. Don't spend your precious time lamenting over a person who wouldn't genuinely lament over you. This sounds bleak, I know, but relationships and love are supposed to be the most beautiful things in the universe. If your relationship is not improving your quality of life on the aggregate, you need to seriously reassess what you want in life, because you deserve better. You only get so much time to find people in your life that make it worth living. Don't get caught up on people who will make you wish you'd never lived it. Yes, you gotta make sure you're choosing them as advertised, not falling in love with their potential. Don't think your perspective is bleak at all. I think it's balanced and disillusioned. In related vernacular, choosing to believe who someone is a great example of living life on life's terms. It's not always easy, but it gets you out of a lot of unnecessary wrestling matches. Probably not going to get this right, but it hit me the hardest after spending 5 years in a toxic relationship. The idea that everyone in their lives is working toward creating a jigsaw, each part of their life, be it work, relationships, or hobbies, make up parts of that jigsaw. Everyone's is different. Some people's careers make up the edges, the less important and interesting parts. Some people's are their relationships. What's important is the center of the puzzle. That's what people are working towards, their life's goals. When you're in a relationship, your puzzles combine. You eventually start working towards a shared goal. You might make some compromises on what goes to the outer edges, but you should both be working toward the same center. Occasionally, it turns out that the centerpiece you were working towards with your significant other isn't what you thought it was. This sucks, believe me, it really freaking does, but there's nothing wrong with cutting your losses. If you're going for a different jigsaw and the pieces don't fit, you won't get a coherent picture. I hope I explained it right, and yes, it's been taken from Daniel Sloss. He puts it way better than I do, so I would recommend checking him out on Netflix. If you go into a marriage or long-term commitment with the impression that you'll be happy all the time and your life will only change for the better, you're absolutely wrong. Be realistic that there will be days where you won't be able to stand each other, your lives may absolutely hit rough patches, and you will not agree on how or why that situation occurred, or even how to get out of it, and the like. Came here to say this, and when you have kids it tends to get even more difficult and adds even more fights and resentment. Life changes, and so do relationships. The butterflies and weak knees only last so long, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing, it's just different. Don't just look for the person who makes your heart race, look for someone who you can also see being best friends with. Because in the end, that's what you become, best friends. Friends fight, but best friends always, or usually, find a way to work through it together. Oh, and it's also my experience that having one shared hobby and one independent hobby helps too. My husband and I game together, but if I need a break from him or vice versa, I'll go read a book and he'll watch sports or whatever. A study of long-term relationships found that successful relationships have one major thing in common. The spouses are verbally supportive of each other's interests and thoughts. For example, if your spouse is very excited about Pokemon Go and wants to tell you all about the monsters that they caught that day, the supportive spouse would listen to them talk about it and be excited for what they're excited about, even if they don't know how the game's played or they think that it's stupid. The couple that's going to divorce, that other spouse would say, "I don't care, that game is for kids," or be generally dismissive of the conversation and change topics. Support what they're excited about as much as you can, even if it's just listening with a smile on your face while you do a shopping list in your head. Without bypassing the obvious one, which is the importance of communication, my mother always told us how you say something is as important as what you're saying. From the tone to how a subject is approached or delivered can make the difference between opening a dialogue or having an argument. Another good one I've seen around Reddit, it's you, plural, versus the problem. If your significant other has a healthy relationship with their ex, especially when they have kids together, it's a good sign. Don't go to sleep angry is bullcrap, especially if you have little kids. If you and your partner are sniping at one another, disengage and get some sleep if it's possible. Most of the fights my husband and I ever had was because one or both of us were exhausted or hangry. But set a time to pick it back up, please. If my husband just says frick it and goes to bed during an argument, I'm angry. If he says, "I need sleep, let's talk tomorrow after dinner," I'm much better. I need to know it's going to be resolved in a timely fashion, and we're both much more reasonable after sleep and cooling down. Choose them. It's not about winning an argument, making a point, having enough time, or giving enough gifts, any of that crap that makes your heart either soar or tremble in the moment. It's about choosing them, knowing them, learning them. Equally as crucial, they choose you back. It's about choosing this person to hold your hand through every moment of every day for the remainder of anything and everything you'll ever experience. Every decision you make has them as a factor. It's about respect and admiration and giving credit where it's due. It's about the truth, about trusting them with the truth, and trusting them to tell it. Choose them, completely. Relationships are not there to fix you. If you aren't happy with yourself, the relationship won't make that a reality. When you want your partner to be fit, attractive, and dress well, don't forget that they want that as well. Want the best for the other person, not for yourself. That's why jealousy is poison. You want your significant other to look good, but only for you? Get a clue. Give them something to want in return. Be a success. Take care of yourself. Learn something every day. Don't waste your time. Be kind and demonstrate that daily. You get what you give. Do the dishes. What's the best witty comeback you've ever witnessed? Back in 10th grade, we had a long-term substitute physics teacher, younger guy, so the tough guys in class wanted to have a pee-pee measuring contest with him, like daily. They constantly made fun of him and joked about his wife. One day, I didn't hear the start of it, but one kid said something like, "I'll bury my face in your wife's chest." Teacher had obviously had enough and said, "No, the only D's you're ever going to see are your grades." The class exploded, nobody ever told on the teacher for saying that, and the guys stopped messing with him. Could a teacher even get in trouble for saying something like that at your school? They certainly wouldn't at mine. They were given wide latitude, especially if provoked. The only case of a teacher getting in trouble for crap was when a math teacher hit a kid for saying something about his, the teacher's, girlfriend. In other words, physical violence could get a teacher in trouble. Words, other than presumably slurs or maybe things that were entirely unprovoked, couldn't. Our geography teacher didn't even use our names, just called us little craps, vermin, emo kid with shampoo deficiency, etc. And we loved her. Sitting in a bar in a country well known for working girls, a guy walks in and starts yelling at a girl, "B-word, you gave me VD." She looked at him and said, "No, I didn't, you bought it." That guy got burned twice. I miss my late uncle. He was the wittiest motherfricker I ever knew. Not a joke teller, just had great one-line comebacks that were never mean, just funny. My favorite was when he went out to eat at a diner with his wife and my mum, just the three of them. The waitress said to him, "Lucky you get to eat with two ladies." My uncle replied, "Yeah, but can you hurry it up? I have to get home to my wife." My Uncle Bob was in a jewelry store a few years ago to buy a present for his longtime girlfriend. They'd been together for over 10 years and had a kid. The manager of the store was helping him as they were fairly busy, and she was called away on some managerial task and handed him to another employee, saying, "Would you help this man? He's looking for a bracelet for his wife." And my uncle said, "Oh no, this is for my girlfriend. I wouldn't spend money like this on my wife."
He said the following stunned silence was deafening. He's also pretty deadpan, so they probably thought he was serious. He seems like a funny guy. Could have been the same guy that came into my restaurant, and when asked by the hostess how he was, he replied, "Well, my wife and girlfriend have left me, so I'm looking for 2 new girls." I mean, let's hope that last one was a joke. There's something to be said for being comfortable enough with your relationship to pull these jokes off directly in front of your spouse, like the first guy did. My mum's dad passed away a couple of days previously. The night before the funeral, a dark and stormy night, the funeral home called 9 p.m. to tell my mother she had forgotten a tie for the suit for tomorrow's showing. She freaked out, realizing that she would have to drive over to the nursing home to fetch a tie and then drive to the funeral home. Dad, who loved himself his clip-on ties and had many of them, said, "Oh, don't go doing that trip on a night like tonight at this time of night. Just grab one of my clip-on ties and take it with you in the morning." My mum, who actually hated that my dad had never learned to tie a tie, responded without missing a beat, "My father would never be caught dead wearing a clip-on tie." Seconds after she realized what she said, she burst into tears. Savaged from beyond the grave. Ow! Grandpa, "In my day, kids were seen and not heard." Grandson, "So are the movies." Was talking to a friend about preferred positions in bed with a partner, and he said, "I like being on the bottom because all I do is frick up anyways." Classic self-roast. Not witnessed firsthand, but heard the recounting or legend many times. Growing up, a friend's older brother nearly got kicked out of high school for this exchange. The teacher, teaching about Jewish lore around bestiality that's strictly forbidden, looks at a student and says, "Does this upset you, David?" David says, "Yeah, it means I can't do the deed with your wife anymore." He had to graduate late since he wasn't allowed back into that class. When I was training for my current job, our teacher chose to inform us that he and his wife had chosen not to procreate by saying, "All my children have 4 legs and tails." I have no idea where it came from, but I spat out, "Holy crap, I'd hate to see what your wife looks like." My class busted out laughing, teacher included. He went a little hard on me the next couple of days, but was a good sport in general. We had a lot of fun in that class, and a big part of that was all the crap slinging. Overly condescending boss looking over my work. "Can I ask a stupid question?" Me, on my last week at that job, "You seem overqualified." "You have a lot of options here." "Sure, I've seen you do it before. In my experience, yes. It's one of your core competencies." I stole this line from American Beauty and paraphrased it, but when my boss would say, "Hey, have you got a second?" I'd answer condescendingly, "For you, boss, I've got at least 30. He had a good sense of humor and thought it was funny every time. Works for, "Have you got a minute?" too. "For you, I've got 3. Another good response to, "Can I ask a stupid question?" is, "You just did. Do you need to ask another?" I had a supervisor who was making fun of a guy's last name. The guy took it and didn't really say anything. When he was done, the supervisor asked him to email him something, and the guy wanted to clarify the spelling of the supervisor's last name, which was Windsor. He said, "Your name doesn't have D in it, right?" The supervisor said no, so the guy said, "Okay, just ooshbag then," and then walked away. Overheard. First guy, braggart and jerk, "I've got this great new job. I've got over 100 guys under me." Second, smartass, "What are you, mowing lawns at a cemetery?" "How many are on top," is what I would have said. Comedian. I remember the first time I did the deed with someone. Girl in the audience, "Yesterday?" Audience was laughing. Comedian, "I'm glad you remember." Audience, screams. I saw that video too. The text really doesn't properly convey how much the audience laughed at the heckler's joke, and how quickly and completely the comedian won the audience back. I was 13 in dance class with some older, catty girls. One of them was picking on me, which ended with her remarking, "Bite me." I responded with, "I'm trying to cut fat from my diet." Entire team heard it and proceeded to chastise me for being so mean. Served her right, the cow. Jimmy Carr was at another comedian's show and he started laughing. If you've seen him, you'll know how distracting that would be. The guy on stage, can't remember who it was, brutally savaged him with, "Jimmy, when I come to see your shows, I don't laugh at your jokes." Up until this moment, I've never appreciated how tough Jimmy Carr's strangled chicken of a laugh is to imitate. My apologies to the listeners. I remember some guy talking about this encounter he had in a grocery store.
He was behind this woman who was giving the cashier a bunch of crap over something. She was being a real chump, and finally, sick of her attitude, he tells her to lighten up and stop holding up the line. He's getting kinda teed off that she's double-barreling this kid who's done nothing wrong, so she whips around on him and says, "This is none of your business," and he responds, "Listen, lady, I'm a veterinarian. B-words are my business." Don't know if that story's true, don't care, I thought it was amazing. Also effective, I'm a gynecologist. C-words are my business. I'm a proctologist. Buttholes are my business. Urologist works too. Members are my business. Guy in grade school was really into war history and building army models, fighter jets, aircraft, carriers, etc. He was quiet and smart, but handsome and part of the main crowd, athletic, etc., but very much a history/war buff. At a party, for whatever reason, he was kind of in an argument beef with one of the hotter and more popular girls in class. The greatest comeback I've ever heard was as follows. Girl: "Whatever, Dan, why don't you go play with your model planes?" Guy, immediately without missing a beat, "Great idea, I can land them on your flat chest." The reaction from the crowd added insult to injury as people went bonkers like it was a walk-off home run in a playoff baseball game. Never have I ever heard a better comeback, real or scripted, ever since. During middle school math class, one of the boys, overweight, was being made fun of by this petite girl. "You should put on a bra, you don't need it." "You should take off your bra, you don't need it." The class went, "Oh," and this guy got a few fist bumps. She cried. I've said a similar one. When I was at the beginning of the 7th grade, I didn't have any hair on my legs. This obnoxious girl noticed and said in front of everyone in the class, "Do you shave your legs?" real loud. I responded, "No, and by the looks of it, you don't shave yours either." Her smirk went to an instant frown, and the class went, "Whoa!" like you said, and the teacher laughed. Teacher was real chill. My grandfather died quite a bit before his time, and my grandmother would get a lot of calls for him. One telemarketing firm was particularly pushy, and one day an unbelievably condescending salesperson called and demanded to speak to the man of the household. My grandmother, who was normally restrained to a fault, replied, "Well, as soon as he comes back from the dead, I'll have him call you," and slammed down the phone. They actually did stop calling after that. A student told another one he wasn't the sharpest crayon in the box. That one responded with, "You're the sharpest because no one wants to work with you." Before you read on, please know that my relationship with my 14-year-old son is built on giving each other a hard time. I said a bad word, don't remember which or why. "You're a horrible mother." If I'm so horrible, how did you turn out so awesome? "I spent a lot of time with Dad." I got wrecked. "Son, can't wait to put you in a home." Me, "I should have drowned you in the bathtub." He's 21 and a butthole. My mum has a wicked sense of humor, and so does my brother. My brother is the middle child. My older sister and I would call my mum at least twice a day each. My brother would rarely call, which hurt her. She started telling him that I guess she failed as a mother and as he doesn't love her. He responded that she could always call him, which has led to at least 3 years of, "To my mother, cold and distant." Cakes, cards, text messages, you name it, from my brother. Had a really witty teacher from my game design class. The vice principal hated him for whatever reason. One day we were all studiously working with our headphones on, programming away while our teacher was up front reading a book. Very available and approachable if we had any suggestions. Then the VP walks into the room. VP, "Mr. Teacher, it has come to my attention that you have absolutely no control over your class. This is unacceptable." Teacher gives him a fairly nonchalant stare, coolly and calmly places his book down, and claps his hands loudly 3 times, which was his very effective way of getting our attention while listening to music. Mind you, the following occurred without us knowing why the VP was there or what he'd said. Teacher, "Okay class, listen up. I've got an exercise for you. This'll only take a few minutes. First and foremost, everybody stand up." We all stood up in near unison very quickly. "Good. Now all I want you to do is leave the room and stand outside in the hallway, and no matter what this guy says," as he points a finger at the VP, "do not come back into the room until I say so. Okay, go." We all exit the room, a little intrigued by what was going on. "Okay, VP, bring them back in the classroom." We didn't budge. To this day, that's one of my favorite stories to tell. That's a pretty big flex, to be honest, even if it's not quite in the neighborhood of the quick and snappy comebacks and the rest of the thread. Nice job though, teacher. When I was in high school, this very large, overweight kid who always picked on me waited till things got quiet in the classroom and said, "Dave eats wang." Everyone laughed and I got embarrassed and nervous, and a few seconds later, after people finished laughing, I stuttered out, yeah, well, you eat everything. I don't know where that came from, but holy crap, the entire room lost it. Haha. Special ed student.
You're so dumb, you make me look like a genius.
I was the instructional aide and had to stop the other kid from trying to fight him, but that burn was so sick it got a chuckle out of me. One of my prouder moments. I was 17 and a 12 or so year old kid came up to me.
Hey babe, can I have your number?
Why? Do you need a babysitter? Not exactly a comeback or insult, but once in biology class we were going over DNA and genetics. We were talking about how traits can be inherited from parents to offspring flowers, and how some could have all the same traits and some could have mixed traits. The packet we used called the same traits flowers purebred and the other ones mixed. Then a girl in the class asked a question.
Have we ever tried to make purebred humans?
Teacher, yeah, some Germans in the 30s and 40s tried to.
Really? What happened?
World War II, followed by laughter from the rest of the class. I remember reading the possibly apocryphal story of a student being told no excuse would be accepted for not taking a test that was the next day. Some student decided to be funny and said, "What about sheer exhaustion from all the climaxes?" To which the teacher replied quickly, "I guess you'll have to write it with your other hand then." Churchill and some lady were having an argument. Lady, Winston, if you were my husband, I would put arsenic in your morning coffee. Churchill, Madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it. Oh boy, have I got an answer for this one. So I'm sitting in my chemistry class, and there's a dude sitting ahead of me, Jeff. He's just minding his own business when two other dudes behind me, Butthead 1 and Butthead 2, proceed to start calling his name and ignoring him whenever he turns around. Just trying to annoy him, I suppose. Important to note, Jeff is a pretty intelligent guy, whereas Butthead 1 and Butthead 2 are so inbred they could be a sandwich. After this happens a few times, Jeff finally turns around and drops this line. Hey, Butthead 1, can I borrow one of your extra chromosomes? Overheard two guys in a restroom while at the urinals. Guy 1 tries to embarrass Guy 2. Guy 1, what's with that red ring on your wang? You need to get that checked out. Guy 2, it's just your mom's lipstick from when I saw her last night. Decent comeback, but the real burn is going to come from whatever red ring condition that guy has on his eggplant. The class clown of my classmates, let's call him K, was known for notoriously teeing off teachers with crude, obscene, and insulting jokes. Well, one day, K decided to ask a 30-something-year-old teacher, "Miss, ever had a baby?" In which the teacher replied with a simple no, but that's not where it ends. K then said to the teacher with a face that only appears on the stupidest of people, "Well, I could give you one," which caused a few sniggers in class. The corners of the teacher's mouth curled into a smile, and with grace she walked up to her desk and said, "No, Kay, I don't want to adopt you," which caused the whole class to erupt into laughter and Kay to shut up for the rest of that year in English. This is still one of the best comebacks I've ever heard, so simple yet so powerful. Oh, you might be able to get away with that in math class. Maybe history. But that kid had no chance against someone who had a far better grasp of the English language than he did. Me and a buddy were at GameStop just browsing and hanging out. Employee comes up to us and asks if we need help finding anything. We told him we were just looking. This was right after the Nintendo DS XL just came out, and he starts trying to sell us on it. Me never having been the handheld gamer type, I told him I wasn't really interested. He decided his ace in the hole would be touting the newer, bigger 4-inch screen. Having enough, I responded, "Take it from me, 4 inches isn't that impressive." That was the end of his sales pitch. One time I was at a coffee shop with my good friend and I saw a dime on the floor. Jokingly, I gave it to him and said, "There, you can buy yourself a life with this." It kinda sounds funnier in my language, and he quickly answered, "I'll just buy yours and give you back the change." I definitely envy people the ability to fire this kind of thing from the hip. I think I could memorize something like this and hold it ready for the right occasion, only to still completely mess it up when the time came. In high school, there was a jerk who was a local star athlete and was pretty much the high school cool athlete bully stereotype. His attempts to pick on people were pretty lame, but people always laughed at them because he was cool, and you always laugh at what the cool kid says. He liked to do the, "An 80-year-old woman called, she wants her upper back strength back," kind of jokes. He also wanted to go to Cornell on a wrestling scholarship. Not only did he not get the scholarship, he also didn't get accepted to Cornell. One day, when he was in the middle of his "so-and-so called" routines, I said, "Hey, Cornell called. Oh wait, never mind, no they didn't." Actually, I didn't think of that until the next day and is one of my life's greatest regrets. The jerk star called and
Was he a paper salesman named Andy?
No, Andy got into Cornell. Douche frat guy walks into a circle of my friends at a party. Frat guy,
Is this the intellectual circle?
my friend,
Not anymore.
was he just trying to be friendly? With my friend at the bar where his girlfriend was working. She stopped by our table and spouted out general complaints about having to work. My friend hands her a straw. She just stares at him blankly. He says, "Suck it up." I've used this one before on a coworker when I worked at the convenience store/deli. She was complaining about some nonsense or another, and I seized the opportunity. The look on her face was priceless. I was just so casual about it, like I barely looked up from what I was doing when I handed it to her. I don't think she even realized I was listening. Our boss found it absolutely hilarious. Sitting around a fire, drinking, telling lies and whatnot, and a female friend asks,
Out of 10, how would you rate yourself in bed?
Quick as a flash, friend of mine says, 11.
Come on, be serious. Who am I going to tell?
Hopefully, everyone. 11. I used to work in retail. Myself and the head of grocery had a call with a supplier where they were going to push really harsh trading terms with us in the short term because we were updating our contract to hold them more accountable for poor performance, delivery, etc. After the call, everyone was very busy discussing that we would just respond in kind later on. The head of grocery pipes up and says,
Yeah, we're going to get screwed in the butt now, but at least they'll get crap on their wangs.
When I was a high school teacher, our assistant principal was caught having an affair. She divorced her husband, but it was all over the news. A few weeks later, a kid hung a banner in the hallway that read, I can't cheat in school, but Mrs. Blank can cheat on her husband. Cool. Pretty good comeback from a 16-year-old. Must be a pretty small town for an affair to be on the news.
Extremely small town.
Tune in at 7 o'clock to see who hasn't cut their grass this week. There was a guy smarting off to the new guy dating his ex.
So, what's it like inside a hoo-ha that's used material?
The new guy? Oh, only the first 2 inches were used. The other 6 are plain sailing. My wife gets mean on vodka. Not like starting a fight mean, more like destroy all ego mean. Winding down a party, close to blackout drunk, and most of us can't even remember how the conversation ended up, with chubby friend insulting wife's lack of chest and implying she should go buy some boobs. Wife says,
But those are expensive.
Chubby friend cups his moobs and says, These did cost me quite a bit. The wife closes the night with,
Just how much do you have to spend at Burger King to get a bosom like that?
I have an issue learning spoken language, so when I started French, I was doing horribly despite how much I was working. During a parent-teacher conference, my French teacher told my parents that I was incapable of learning French. My dad leaned in and said, Madam, there are mentally impaired children in France who are capable of learning French. He's capable of learning, you're just incapable of teaching. I was tending bar at a place in Buffalo back in the 90s. Pretty girl at the bar lifts her glass to take a drink and accidentally spills some down the front of her shirt when she gets the lip of the cup to her mouth. The 4 to 5 people around her say nothing, and without missing a beat, she laughs and says,
I must be full.
What's an unexpectedly well-paid job? Boiler operator. Get paid $35 an hour to play Skyrim on Switch while watching Netflix. Just have to find one that's all operator and no maintenance.
Which state do you work in? It's really hard to get a job as a boiler operator, especially without a license.
I just wanted to chime in. I got hired as a boiler operator in Hawaii. Pay started at $38 an hour, and I didn't need any license or education. We did all the training in-house.
Hello? Yes, I'd like to apply to be your assistant. A job in Hawaii?
I'll be there as soon as I can. I work at home as a closed captioner broadcaster on the news. I make my own schedule and make between $35 to $65 an hour depending on the job. Large investment to get started, but significantly worth the payout.
What qualifications does your job require? Very interesting.
You have to go through a course. The course is $800 per month, and you work at your own pace. I worked while I did it at my main job, so it took me about 7 months to complete. Most people are between 6 and 9 months, though. Between the course and all the equipment, it's about a $10,000 investment to start, but very much worth it, and you make the investment back very quickly.
Keep in mind voice recognition software for CC is getting better every day.
An office job, but you're secretly on Reddit.
That's my job. Shush.
Airline dispatcher. A girl I dated many years ago I met because she was living in my town training to be an airline dispatcher. There are just a handful of schools that teach it. I had no idea what an airline dispatcher was, let alone how much money they get paid. Dispatchers at FedEx can make $150,000 per year or more. It also gives you a lot of options to advance in an airline, like being a station chief at an airline. The girl I dated had a dream to one day be Air France station chief in Tahiti. I don't know if she made it or not. I've googled this position, and to me it is not at all surprising that this is a very well-paid job. From my uneducated perspective, coordinating airline operations over an airline or entire airport seems incredibly stressful. Court reporting. Stenography is a tough skill to learn, but plenty of court reporters earn over $100K, and no college degree required. Although most court reporters will need to be certified. There's a shortage of them too. I work as the videographer, and they're like magicians. Not many people finish the school for it though, and most of it is online now. The downsides though, they're 99% of the time not employees, so they have to supply their own insurance, pay their own transportation fees, and buy their own machines, which are expensive. They do make a lot of money though. I think it evens out for sure. I'm currently in court reporting school and holy crap is it hard, but I enjoy it. I should be finished later this year and can't wait to start working. It is very hard. And then you can get out there and feel overwhelmed for a while. But stick with it, there's such a need right now. Fun career and you can do so many different things. My mom's been a court reporter for maybe 10 years, one of them freelance. She got a job with a county judge. She gets like $60K salary and only has to go into work when her judge has court 2 to 3 days a week. She also does a lot of freelance transcribing that brings in bank too. Definitely a stable career, would recommend. I'm a stenographer and have been since I was 17. I also transcribe police interviews. In the last week I've heard 1. A man describing in graphic detail how he dismembered his teenage daughter and buried her. 2. A man detailing how he did his 7-year-old daughter a favor when he committed the unspeakable act against her. 3. An 18-year-old graphically describing her home invasion and the terrible things the intruders did to her. 4. A murder case involving the nitty-gritty of stabbing wounds. I'm squeamish and get all queasy hearing the wound details. And 5. A coronial inquiry into the burning death of a firefighter. Plot twist, I only worked 3 days last week. Technical writing. If you have the ability to take complex technical information and simplify it according to the reading audience, you can make well over $100K annually. People ridicule English degrees until they find out how much can be earned as a technical writer. Mobile crane operator. Union guys pull over $200K, and it's a trade that's pretty easy on the body. Operating engineers have a surprisingly high occurrence of back, neck, and wrist injuries. They do make a ton of money though. Knees, too. Those cabins and large machinery are not made for comfort, although I hear newer ones are a big improvement. Can confirm. OE for 10 years and have many issues with carpal tunnel, back pain, knees, and so on. I regularly worked 12 to 20-hour shifts though. It's not uncommon to run equipment that has no AC. Once ran a drill in Southern California where the heat in the cab was around 140 plus around noon. It sucked so bad. We started work at 1 a.m. to get enough time in the day. Anyone that runs equipment long enough has endless stories of misery and pain. Yet, I miss it so much. I don't know if this is true in other cities, but train and bus operators in Boston make bank. I've rarely met a higher paid, less engaged group of employees in my life, and I work in recruiting. I have a friend who's AmITheA bus mechanic. He makes so much money, he can retire at 45. Plus, if you put in 20 years, you get a pension of half your pay for the rest of your life. I fix hospital beds. Will be making $100K within my first 2 years with full benefits. I also have full control over my hours. Power linemen make bank. Not a lot of people even know about it. Insanely dangerous job though. 2 linemen died in our small town because some person or family didn't shut their breaker off when they hooked up their generator while they were working on it. Electricity is freaking terrifying, and sometimes even the smallest things missed can have major consequences. Just for clarity, the situation was during a natural disaster and sleep depravity was most definitely the root cause of the deaths. Linemen were working and barely sleeping for a week straight before backup could come. But the lack of sleep in itself is a major danger, as is the weather they sometimes work in, or the electricity itself. Linemen take safety seriously, but one thing going wrong can end in disaster. Even something as simple as flipping a wrong switch or forgetting a single piece of safety equipment. But as far as things go, electricity is probably one of the last things on Earth you want any accident with. I drive machinery in a coal mine in Australia. I make about $170K. Even our new trainees are paid pretty well, about $48 per hour. I think it ends up being close to $90 to $100K. Easy money for sitting on your ass in an air-conditioned cab. Longshoreman. If you're a senior member of a union, you make absolute cake, $180K plus a year. Yeah, it seems anything involving very heavy machinery is a good, dependable way to make a solid amount of money. Wish I'd figured that out earlier in life. Becoming a locksmith changed my life. Well paid, and I get to help people out. I love it. Self-employed cleaning services, I don't know exactly what to call them. My parents started getting paid $35 an hour cleaning a community center to $50 from cleaning offices. My mum started it, and then my dad joined in to help her with the hours and taking care of the house and kids. Eventually, my mum got good contacts and started cleaning the offices of managers from factories, Sacramento politicians, and stuff alike. Can't express how proud I am of my mum. She turned all those crappy Hispanic cleaning lady jokes into something bragworthy. Utility lineman. There's a developing shortage nationwide due to baby boom retirements. It's well-paid base, but the overtime is fabulous. I have a couple of friends who got into this after they left the military. They all make well over $100K. Storm season brings in tons of overtime. They're all in their late to mid-20s buying houses. UPS drivers can make close to $100K if you stay there long enough. Blew me away when I first heard that. My uncle was a UPS driver in Maine for 30 years. He had to quit due to an unrelated injury, but I'm pretty sure he was making high 80K to low 90K before that. Some of the happiest people in society too, especially if you're single. How so? You know the old jokes about the mailman being your dad? The UPS are those guys. Yeah, it's really good money, but there are some negatives. The worst is that you're in a truck with no air conditioning that is mostly sealed up if you're in the back. In Florida, that's freaking miserable. Also, they have polyester uniforms. Other drawbacks include your route for the day gets put together by some fricking optimization program that parcels out minute by minute how long you're going to take. It does not take into consideration traffic jams, finding parking spots inside of a busy city. It just calculates that you drive there and then assumes you're going to find parking right out in front, and that the elevator works, and that someone is home at all, and that you're standing there with 10 60-pound parcels containing a complete weightlifting bench plus weights, and you look up the 3 flights of stairs with no elevator and you know you've got approximately 2 to 3 minutes per package. Yeah, nah, frick that. Oh, and plus you're going to be on the front lines of receiving feedback, so if anyone is getting cursed out for a bad delivery, it's you first. Ditch digger, actually directional boring. Guy I know is literally a ditch digger, but got into this by renting the specialized equipment just at the right time and right place. Fiber optic build-out in the 1990s. He will also say that he made it simply by being reliable and trustworthy. I do not know exactly how much he makes, but he has an 80-foot sport fisherman, probably cost $7 to $10 million, and he brought a $4 million property on a whim. I was a bathroom attendant in a fancy restaurant, made $100 a night in cash to do next to nothing. Well, they don't do nothing. Their purpose seems to be to make the bathroom experience half as convenient and 1000% more awkward, and they always succeed. I'm pretty sure they're only in there to keep people from doing hard substances in the bathroom. Not a good sign regardless. Oh, and to stop people doing the deed in the stalls. The year I got out of high school, I picked up a job at a private country club, working the bag room. When I spotted a member, I'd grab their reserved private cart from their garage and load their cubs on it that they stored in the bag room. A couple of damp towels hung on the back, pencils, scorecards, and everything waiting by the time they stepped up. Place was primarily executives and whatnot for like the major automotive companies here in Michigan. I made a couple of hundred each day in tips. During a couple of tournaments that took place, I went home with around $500 in my pocket. I took home so much each day that I kept forgetting to pick up my paycheck, which was something like another $400 each week. Late 90s minimum wage. Only part of the job I hated was using the picker to get the balls off the range. There was always some butthole trying to use me for target practice. Funeral director is a great paying job with not a whole lot of schooling. That's what I do, and I make about $75,000. If you have a strong stomach, cleaning up death and crime scenes pays very well and requires very little education. I have a friend who did this. It's definitely paid well, but he talked about some things he saw, and I don't know if I could do it myself. Yeah, I think I could deal with working around dead bodies, but the second any sort of horrific accidents or murder was involved, I think it would begin to get too much. There is a job in my country where you're paid something like 10,000 euros per mission to touch newborn chicks and determine whether they're boys or girls. The ones near me must be really bad at their job because they seem to have like a 50% success rate when we buy chicks, so we may as well leave it up to chance. Well, there's also that part where you put male chicks in a grinder all day. In some states, corrections officers make insane money with just a GED and a willingness to work overtime. Let me specify some states, guys. Some states. In California, those guys can make $125K a year with little overtime. Bartending. Some people know, but the overwhelming majority don't. If I only worked 20 hours, 2 days a week this year, weekends, I would make close to 50k. If I really tried and worked 2 solid jobs 5 days a week, I could easily hit close to, if not over 100k. This doesn't apply to every bar or bartender. You're not going to make this kind of money at an Applebee's or a super franchised corporate establishment.
So true. I have a good friend that bartends in the Spanish club in Miami, and he said if he decided to work 4 days a week instead of working 1 to 2 days a week, he could probably make 100k a year. Hot dog vendors can earn 6 figures per year. Buddy of mine went to Hopkins back in the day and noticed that the lacrosse games, while well attended, had no vendors. Nobody seemed to want the job, so he asked if he could. Year later, he had all of his friends bagging hot dogs the night before and was buying drinks and chips by the truckload. Sold everything for $1 and came home after every game with trash bags full of dollars. Year or so later, the school realized what a cash cow it was and took over the gig, but my buddy had pretty much paid for school by then. Collecting golf balls. Saw on the news a guy makes over $250,000 traveling around and using scuba gear getting golf balls. I mean, that's more scuba diving. If in Florida, that's very well worth it, considering for the sole reason of fricking alligators. It's the same with underwater welding. No one's paying you for the welding part as much as they're paying you for the possibility that some tube sucks you in and you die.
I don't know if it's surprising, but one people don't think about, selling ad space on local broadcast stations. I do it and make more than most families do in my area, and I'm at a smaller market. Going into a medium one can put you well into 6 figures. I work as a lunch lady. I get school vacations off, summers off, and weekends. No nights or even really afternoons. It's amazing. I also get benefits and every year I get a raise. So between the money and the time off, the job is 100% worth it. Furry artist. Seriously, furries will shovel out so much money for commissions and then tip on top of that. If you get a big enough following, it can be surprisingly well paid. Contractors for household moving companies with 18-wheelers can gross between 200 and 400k in a year.
I'd be interested to know how much is profit considering the running costs plus insurance for an 18-wheeler, let alone the cost of an 18-wheeler.
Train driver for London Underground. Heavily unionised industry and London's dependency on the network means they've been able to demand an enviable package. High base pay, high rates over time, and travel passes for the family. Document specialist for utilities. Basically, you have to know someone to get into it, but I went from making under 40k for an office admin to 120k as a doc specialist. No college requirement, often people just get their spouses or siblings on because they've worked in an office before. As a general rule, this is terrible for anyone who actually knows what they're doing on the job, but whatever. A lot of times I'm just getting paid to hold down a desk. YouTubers who just copy Reddit posts into a voice thing and then upload it with the text in the background. And for those saying people who actually speak and make it unique aren't that bad, I agree. I still don't watch them, but I agree. My point is those YouTubers who literally just copy-paste into a text-to-speech program that they found on the internet.
Haha, this thread will probably get reviewed by one of them, and this comment will be subsequently skipped.
First of all, I've called you second commenter, and I agree, the ones who use AI are terrible. Good thing that doesn't happen here. Other than that, no comment. I think a lot of this thread is really misleading. First, everyone is saying, I knew a guy, or I made 100k, and while I don't doubt that these are true things people are sharing, it isn't what someone else can expect to make. We should be talking about median salary or medium wage. Second, especially since we aren't talking about median salaries, almost nobody included the location. A few people did. Making 80k in New York or San Francisco is like making 30k in a small Midwestern town, according to most of the living/salary comparisons websites. The real truth is, a reasonably free market is going to adjust wages based on supply and demand, meaning that a job that is either difficult to do because it takes lots of skill, training, or education and pays well, like a heart surgeon, or if a job is dirty, dangerous, or otherwise unpleasant, and has to pay well to attract candidates, like certain fishermen, or a job whose wages are high due to external factors, like a union or lobbying body that sets wages which results in far more candidates than jobs, like my union painter uncle that makes 120k instead of the national medium of 40k. Top comment is a garbage collector in New York City. First, 100k in New York City is the equivalent of 40k in a small Midwestern town, and that wage is artificially high, resulting in far more applications than jobs, meaning odds are you can't get that job. National median is 25k. Next top is aircraft dispatcher.
National median salary is $32K according to Glassdoor and Salary.com, but $40K if you believe the Airline Dispatcher Federation. Finally, a lot of people are talking about starting a business doing X, which is entirely different than working X on a salary. Median salary of a plumber is $45K in the US. They don't get the hourly wage they bill you for, and if they start doing their own plumbing business, they need to pay for insurance, benefits, and additional taxes, advertising, and a million other things on top of just being a plumber. They also have to deal with all the hours when they don't have to work. Higher risk, but higher potential reward. A successful business person running a plumbing company who has about 10 employees might make $200K or more per year, but they also lose $100K. And it doesn't really compare to a salary. Especially today with all the salary information we have available to us. A job that pays a lot, that doesn't suck, that anyone can do, isn't going to keep paying a lot. Trader Joe's managers. General managers of stores make $100,000 plus. Assistant store managers make $60,000 to $80,000 per year. Not bad for working grocery. Scrum Masters in software development industry. They're paid six figures for basically setting up meetings and being cheerleaders. They don't have any responsibility for delivery of work, and they don't have any work beyond what I described. My Scrum Master is a little bit more valuable than you describe, but it is an odd thing worth pointing out in this thread. He's not a useless toady. Half of the value is having a single point of contact for "what's going on?" type questions, so that the workers can work and the need-to-knowers can get the information they need to know. I'm a gardener. There's a serious lack of folks willing to do manual labor in the outdoors year-round. Most commercial properties have to maintain a certain amount of green area in our city. Hospitals and other places like that need legitimate crews to do the work with professionalism. No catcalling or spitting or swearing, etc., including bonded employees and good insurance and equipment, etc. As a result, we're in demand and we get paid surprisingly well. No university education is needed, low barrier to entry, great pay, and job security. Dog groomer. It's a weird industry though, and a skill that really has to be learned hands-on. Grooming schools can be a good start, but I know great groomers that never went to school for it, and terrible groomers that spent thousands on classes. Just being good at handling dogs is the best foundation for success. It's not the easiest job in the world. It's largely commission-based, and if you're lucky, you get any benefits out of it. But if you get enough practice to be good at it and build up a loyal clientele base in a decently affluent area, it's very good money. The haircuts I do range from $70 to $175, and I'm paid 50%, which averages out to around $30 to $35 an hour most days. Not everyone tips, but those that do usually tip $5 to $20 per dog, and because I do about 40 dogs in an average week, that's an extra couple of hundred in my pocket. So if you don't mind working on your feet all day, sustaining repetitive motion injuries, not taking lunch breaks, and dealing with insane customers, then picking the crap out of dogs' buttholes is a good living. San Francisco Poop Patrol, a 10-person team, and all they do is go around the city and clean up human feces, which is apparently a problem there. They make around $80,000 a year, plus pensions and benefits, which bring the total to about $150K. Not even kidding. Let's go scoop poop. But it's in San Francisco, one of the most expensive cities in the country. Yeah, $80K is still really struggling in San Francisco. Some of those people pooping in the street make $80K a year. Underwater welding pays a tremendous amount. The only one I know personally retired comfortably in his 40s. Given how dangerous underwater welding is, I'd say the pay isn't surprising at all. Notary clerks. $30 just for signing a document and putting it in a register. The HVAC dude who used to come to my work to clean our furnaces made six figures and retired at 40. Now he lives in Mexico and teaches people to scuba dive. At the right place, waitressing. I got tipped $800 waitressing at a bowling alley for a team-building company party. You pick the right restaurant and just get good at it, and you make bank. I know people who work at mid-range restaurants who make $80K a year, and you know they don't truthfully declare the tips they get. People who hired a personal investigator. What did you uncover? My mum was an attorney who worked in the workers' compensation insurance. Her colleagues were representing a woman who had been gravely injured on the job and deemed totally unable to work. The opposing attorney hired a PI to investigate this woman. Let's call her Jane. They get to court and present the video footage as their platinum evidence, proving that this woman was totally able to work. Here is Jane mowing her lawn. Here she is unloading her groceries from her car. Here she is walking the dog. Here she is going for a run, etc., etc. Jane's attorneys sat there totally quiet. When it was their turn to cross-examine the PI, they declined any questions. Their turn was up next. Who is the first witness for the opposing side? We would like to call Jane's identical twin sister to the stand.
Jane's identical twin had moved in with her bedridden sister after the work accident. Full benefits awarded to Jane. Apparently the look on the faces of the opposing attorneys was the stuff lawyers' dreams are made of. My grandfather once hired a PI. See, he has a large vineyard as well as a few engineering projects he's working on. Well, 2 guys pressed charges on him because they claimed they'd hurt their backs working for him, and he needed to pay for all the medical bills, disability, etc. He thought it was a little fishy and hired a PI. The PI uncovered that they had not actually been hurt and documented the 2 people working at a lumber yard, which has a lot more physical labor than a vineyard. It cost my grandfather a bit to hire him, but way less than what he would have had to pay those 2 scammers.
I think this is probably the most common thing a PI does.
Probably number 2 on the list, number 1 being catching cheating spouses. There probably is no number 3.
I worked as a PI for a couple of years, and it's really not the case. It costs a heck of a lot of money to hire a PA, and just isn't really worth it when all you have to do is catch your spouse tripping up with an undeleted email or a Facebook message. The whole PI to catch a cheating spouse thing is just something you see on TV and movies a lot. That isn't to say it never happens, it's just not the most common thing. It's almost always disability claims or some other legal matters. If you think about it, it really makes sense. When you're threatened with having to pay a crap load of disability money to someone, you have a lot more to lose, and chances are you're a little more able to afford a PI than some stay-at-home wife whose husband works late a little too often. Well, Mr. Former PI, that may be true in the majority of cases, but I will say that in this group of stories it seems like some people have been crazy paranoid enough to hire PIs to spy on their spouses. Starting with the following. My wife hired one. She found that she was wasting money and that I'm a very boring person. We came from different cultures, but we knew we wanted to be with each other. She's Hispanic, born in another country, and I'm a hillbilly from Appalachia. There was a lot of jealousy early on, both sides, because we simply couldn't relate. After a while, I grew tired of being suspicious and told her that if she wanted to be with someone else, to just tell me and I'll move on. But to just tell me. It was very freeing for me. I guess to her, though, it only made her more suspicious. I got off work at 7 a.m. and there wasn't much to do, and not many places that were open for a couple more hours, so I would go to the gym. And I guess she didn't like not being able to account for the gap between me leaving work and me coming back to the apartment. The guy she hired to follow me around was terrible. I had my routine, get off work, go to the gym, go grab some breakfast, hit up Blockbuster, maybe go to a pet store, we had birds and fish. At the time in the morning these places are empty. Like I said, I'm a boring person. Cut to a few days later, I leave the gym and the new guy behind, head to a restaurant and in comes the new guy from the gym. Creepy. I eat, then leave, go to Blockbuster and in he comes. So here I am suspicious. The next day at the gym, I'm telling my buddy about how creepy it was that the new guy shows up everywhere I go and he agrees. I'm done working out and tell my buddy that I'm going to leave and that I'm going to a specific pet store, and if the guy leaves the gym right after me, that my buddy should head to the same pet store. And that was what happened. I go to the store, a couple of minutes later, in walks the guy, and a minute after that, in comes my buddy. We ended up pinning the guy to the floor, I asked why, and he starts saying, "It's just a job," and that he ain't seen nothing. We release him back into the wild with the order that he's not to show up at the gym again. I get home, call her up, and say that she hired the biggest idiot around and that she needs to stop wasting money. She asks, "What happened?" I tell her to ask him since she gave him money. Her jealousy died down after that. Well, that and I made the ultimate quote to her that made sense. I said, "If I was getting laid as much as you think I am, wouldn't I be a lot happier?" And that was that. For those folks hoping for a different ending, sorry to disappoint. We've been together for almost a quarter of a century and everything is fine. Maybe she just couldn't believe that she was involved with someone so boring. If a PI followed me around, goes to work 5 minutes late every day, comes home from work at the same time every day, stays at home until work the next day, stays at home all day on the weekends. I just hope he doesn't reveal what kind of adult content I watch.
This pretty much sums up my life. In between work, they would see me take a whole bunch of green herb and watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia for hours.
If my significant other hired a PI on me, I'd be fricking livid.
Livid's a strange name for a mistress. I worked as a PI one summer for a friend of my dad's. Busted 3 people faking disability claims. Oh man, was that some really boring work.
Previous PI here, work is boring, but when it's exciting, it's very exciting.
I found out that PIs are pretty damn expensive.
My dad's friend is a PI. He charges $45 to $65 an hour, and also charges for whatever gas or transportation fees he incurs while working. He's pretty well off too. Apparently a lot of people need the service, which surprises me.
Lots of PIs are contracted out through various police departments as well.
And law firms to disprove or limit damages claims in personal injury cases.
My mother hired one to follow my father, who's a 6th grade teacher. So he was cheating on my mum with a former student of his who was 14 years old, and my father was 36 at the time.
Was jail involved soon after?
No, the parents of the girl didn't press any charges, as they were pretty okay with it. In fact, he married her soon after. A relative of a friend of mine approached me one day and asked if I could help in finding his brother on the internet somehow. His brother had up and left town with no indication of where he was going, leaving a wife and 2 small children behind. They were not separated and still lived with the kids. He took little more than the clothes on his back. They didn't know if he was in trouble, running from someone, or just a deadbeat. They bought me his passworded desktop PC, which was an XP machine and easily cracked. There wasn't anything in the browser history, the documents folders had nothing, and the machine was relatively blank. I did find a World of Warcraft installation though, and inside that was everything I needed. In the game's screenshots folder, I found several shots of his dwarf talking to a female night elf, very cutesy-like, including some chat lines about being together, and flirty emotes. It was clear what he had done. This turbo nerd had left his family for a night elf. In the screenshots, I could see a few add-ons. One particular World of Warcraft add-on, Pratt, that he had installed has a scrollback chat buffer it saves. I was able to locate the settings file containing that buffer, and in it was his last conversation with her before leaving, including an actual address, 800 miles away. Google provided a name, phone number, and satellite photo of her house and car. They were blown away when I gave them his pinpoint location. He called the number right there on his cell phone and asked for him, and sure enough, he was there, probably shocked to crap to get a call from his brother after this disappearing act. As far as I know, he didn't return home, but I'm sure my little detective work made sure the kids got their child support. In conclusion, Turbo Nerd Dwarf Hunter becomes the hunted. Okay, 2 stories of PIs being used to discover scumbags in a row. That makes a nice break from all the cases of personal injury claims. What crappy dads. I hope they got drained for everything they were worth in child support. My uncle hired one to follow his wife after she gave some signs of an affair. She was the principal of a school and claimed she had to work long hours or would attend every single school event and function and would be gone long hours or go on business trips, among other things. Turns out she was totally having relations with the vice principal. He got camera footage of them going to her house during lunch breaks for a quickie on my uncle's bed. He got other footage as well of them meeting up numerous times. It was never confirmed, but some kids at the school later claimed she and the VP had done it in their office. After it all came to light, it dawned on all the other aunts and uncles the many times my aunt would drop off her daughter at random times and random nights at our houses because she had a spontaneous school function and needed a babysitter. It was also mysterious when she surprised my uncle with chest augmentation surgery, which turns out was for the other guy. How does one surprise their spouse with elective surgery? Do they just roll over in bed and say, "Look what the melon fairy left, honey"? In 2005, my mother had suspicions that my father was cheating on her whenever he would go to the Dominican Republic. So she hired an investigator in DR who began to watch my father. The PI express mailed her some pictures of my father and some young woman kissing, dancing, going into hotel rooms, the works. She later found out that the woman was the mother of my father's illegitimate daughter, my half-sister. My father got her a visa and she is living with us now in the States. I was trying to locate a former business account who had failed to return some of my property. PI quickly determined she used several different names, several different birth dates, sometimes claiming to be a senior citizen, and had used 20 different addresses in the previous few years, all over the country. PI was as baffled as I was, said she was either a con artist or mentally ill, or both. Anyways, too bad for her, her new employer had issued a press release about her hiring. Rather than contacting her, I'd already tried that, I'd exchanged some emails with her without results, I contacted her new boss. UPS man delivered my property to my door 2 days later. My mum is a divorce attorney, and she has one she recommends to her clients when necessary. It's all about hiding money. I've talked to the guy and basically he does a lot of online research and looking at money statements and stuff. Sounds actually really boring. I have not hired one, but my now father-in-law hired one when I first started dating his daughter. Funny part is, I was working in the port, with ships, when I stopped at the guard shack and told them that I was being followed by some strange person. The PI pulled up next and had 3 port police officers pull guns on him and tell him to get out of the car. I think he ended up going to jail. Laughed my butt off, but I did sort of feel bad. I would have called the dad up and offered him anything he wanted to know, at only half the cost. My uncle was a PI for a while. He mostly worked for insurance groups and lawyers to make sure the correct person was being served or prosecuted. He would have to figure out stuff like who burned the farm down, John Smith Jr. or John Smith Sr. Was Jane Doe the divorcee or the third wife? One time, this kid wrecked his Ferrari. Kid ended up posting his version of the wreck on MySpace. He told how he'd intentionally wrecked it because his parents didn't get him the Ferrari he wanted. It was very Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec. My mum is a PI. She's asked me to go into bars and adult clubs with her on multiple occasions to observe individuals. Both made sense to remain inconspicuous as well as her own safety. Let me just say, you've never really been to an adult club until you go with your mum. She was trashing girls left and right out of earshot. About 10 years ago, my cousin was deployed in Afghanistan on his second tour. During phone calls back home, his daughter made mention of a new uncle he didn't know existed. My aunt decided to hire a PI for him and found out his wife was cheating with a doctor. Of course, he was heartbroken. The divorce that followed was quick. However, there is a bright side to this. After switching to a reserve unit, he was able to finish college and go to law school. His ex-wife? She was dumped by the doctor not long after the divorce. She attempted to reconcile, but my cousin refused. He's remarried. She lives with a group of friends in some run-down house. When I was 10, my parents separated and went through a nasty divorce. Sometime during all of that, he hired a PI to follow my mum around. The PI concluded that my mother was a working girl. She did escort service and hung around the doctor's conventions. The PI took photos and logged everything. My dad snuck into the house my mother and I lived in with a camcorder and recorded the discovery of a ledger containing all of her clients and the money exchange. He leveraged it in the divorce so he didn't get bent over entirely. My dad didn't tell me any of this until I was 17 or so. I didn't believe it until I thought back and remembered some things. She had a pager, and back in the 90s only a few types of people had pagers: doctors and working girls. She would suddenly be gone late at night if I woke up. She would always say she was out grocery shopping. I also remember walking in on her wearing a revealing dress made of leather. No more revealing than what girls wear to the club, but hey, that crap is weird when it's your mum and you're 10. Anywho, my dad still throws it at me when he wants to prove how much better of a person he is than my mother or my stepdad, who married a working girl. In her defense, she was paying her way to become an RN, which she is now. In conclusion, PI followed my mum for my dad during a nasty divorce. Found out she was a working girl. Dad holds grudge to this day and tells his kids about it. And another piece of evidence that many spouses apparently hire PIs to discover cheating spouses. Okay, so I'll bite. Nothing like hunting down a psycho ex or anything like that, but it's interesting enough. So I was living in England and had an uncle living in assisted living in California. He was 95 at the time, a little fuzzy about some things, but on the whole, sharp as a tack. He was deeply religious and attended church weekly. A couple of women from the church had made friends with him, drove him to church, bought him trinkets and whatnot, and basically took care of him, sort of. Sounded okay to me. Heck, I was in England, what was I going to do? The only thing that jarred me a little bit was one time when I was talking to the woman on the phone, one of them told me that my uncle had signed over power of attorney to them. That struck me as a little odd. My uncle and I weren't really close, but being his heir, along with my brother, wouldn't he have told me about it? I shrugged it off, though. Again, what was I going to do? I was 6,000 miles away. Besides, and this is what gets a lot of people, he was of sound mind. He was a free agent, so it was really none of my fricking business. A year or two go by, I check on him periodically and everything seems fine. I come home one night and my phone is ringing. It's the assisted care residence. Crap, what's happened? Is he dead? He's 97 fricking years old. I was expecting it any day. No, it's these two little old ladies. They're trying to get my uncle to sign over power of attorney to them. Wait a minute, hadn't he already done that? The alarm bells go off. Something is deeply wrong and it was going to make at least 24 hours to get back to California, given connections, flights, renting a car, blah blah blah. So I call a PI from England, tell him the situation, and as soon as I can get to the part about the women, he stops me and says, "Wait, let me tell you how this story goes." He then proceeds to tell me that this is a common scam. These women cruise the churches looking for these little old guys who on the surface have no family to speak of and healthy retirement and investment accounts. So I get my butt back to California ASAP, and unfortunately my uncle has signed nothing. Although at this point they're pushing him hard. They'd even kidnapped him and taken him to an attorney and tried to get him to sign over POA to them. Little did they know who they were dealing with. My dad's side of the family sets the gold standard for stubbornness. I learned this early on when my dad said no, that was it, give it up, because that was an answer that was not going to change. My uncle, all 100 pounds and 97 years of him, had dug in his heels. So we signed over POA to me and now the hunt begins. Where were his accounts? These women handed over nothing to me, a few receipts but no accounts, nothing. So this PI and I ended up hanging out for a few days, tracking everything down. I can't begin to tell you how much I learned from this man, a complete original. Vietnam vet, former Navy SEAL, carried a knife in his boot and a gun in his shoulder holster. So he shows me it's mostly research, and that I resonate to since I work in research. Painstaking, boring, turning over one pebble at a time kind of investigation. Knowing how to talk to people, how to observe. It requires a massive amount of patience. We went to every bank within 20 miles, and by schmoozing and showing my POA, we found what we thought was every account. I then went over everything. They had played a shell game, borrowing from him, hadn't quite stolen from him, but it took quite a while to figure out what they'd done. Then I find the pièce de résistance. They had him sign over all of his retirement accounts to them, or more specifically to the younger one, being a spry 81 years old. So we do some further investigation. Turns out this one is broke. Looks like she sent it back to the Philippines or something. She spent a lot of time in Vegas. So here's how it shakes out, a common scam. These two little Jezebels made a play for my uncle, who fell for the younger one, hook, line and sinker. They get him to sign over all of his retirement accounts to them, and then all they have to do is outlive him. At 81 and 83, respectively, with my uncle 96, it should be easy. So I confront them, told them that I knew what they were doing and I had the evidence. I didn't really, I only strongly suspected, and that I could turn them in. So they spilled the beans, told me what they'd done. They swore that they had only borrowed the money. We signed it all back over, I didn't turn them in, I figured it would all come out in the wash anyway. I didn't want to see them go to jail, and I wasn't sure I could prove it anyway. But if it wasn't for this PI who had my back, they would have gotten away with it. I'm a firm believer now, I learned a crap ton for him. Now for the editorial. This crime is rampant, intimidating, bamboozling, and ripping off the elderly. Most DAs won't touch it. If you even get a whiff that an elderly relative is being abused or ripped off, if it even crosses your mind, step in immediately. Kick butt and take names. You may be the only defense they have. But I'll tell you, it turned out to be one of the most interesting experiences of my life. My uncle got the last laugh. He outlived both of them and passed away peaceably at 100 years old, with me there with him. One of the last things he told me was that he had forgiven them for what they'd done. In conclusion, elderly uncle is nearly scammed out of $500,000 by a couple of Jezebels cruising the churches. PI steps in and saves the day. I learn a crap ton. We discovered that the driver who hit me not only went off the side of the road where I was, legally four-wheeling on a quad, she was talking on the cell phone, looking into the passenger seat, driving with no insurance and a revoked license because of previous convictions for causing accidents. After the truck, pushing my quad into a T-boned position, plowing up so much dirt in front of us that after 70 feet it finally came up to a halt. The investigator had evidence that she was driving 35 miles per hour in a 25 zone and she didn't brake after the impact. After the truck came to a stop, she jumped out and started running away, but witnesses caught her and held her there. My friend, who was sitting behind me, both of us 14, were carted off in ambulances and I never saw this woman's face. The trooper wrote the report that I, 14 years old, had taken an RV instead of an ATV and pulled out in front of the woman, though it was clear the accident happened off the roadway. The trooper interrogated me while I was lying on the ground waiting for ambulances before my parents even arrived. I was in shock while he rephrased the question, "Have you had any alcoholic or illegal substances today?" several times. My neighbors finally asked him to wait until my parents arrived. In the hospital room, he questioned me further while my parents were on their way. The nurse had to ask him to stop as my neck was being evaluated, and I had not even had pain medication yet. The accident was deemed my fault, although there were 2 eyewitnesses who testified against the woman to the trooper, and later in court I was told by the DMV I would have to pay the woman's truck damages before I was allowed to get a driver's license. And I carried SR22 insurance for 5 years after I received it. The investigator uncovered proof that the trooper knew the woman who hit me and was possibly friends with her. For the months in between the accident and when the investigation was complete, I fought an awful amount of guilt, believing it was my fault and not having any memory of the accident. My friend's leg was badly injured and required extensive surgeries over the next 5 years, and she was visiting from Texas and had to be medevaced back there via helicopter, which left her family with a huge financial burden. During that time, I even considered taking my own life and took one attempt that thankfully failed. My parents took the case to the state Supreme Court over the course of the next 3 years, and when we finally came to trial, the judge said the only way the report could be cleared and the financial obligations relieved is if the state trooper took back his statement. When we began going that route, we were told the trooper had been dismissed from the force for wrongful behavior and his testimony was worth noting. That was an expensive lesson in corruption. The financial stress contributed greatly to my parents' divorce. However, if we hadn't hired the investigator, we may have went on thinking it was my fault. I'm very thankful to know that it truly wasn't. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.